Meeting is being broadcast live to our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, can I ask everyone in the chamber to switch off or make silent their mobile phones, laptops and other devices, please. Before we move to the business on the agenda, I would like to remind you of the housekeeping rules for the meeting. As in all previous council meetings, any requests to speak must be made by using your voting handset. Once invited to speak, please stand up and face forward and switch on the closest microphone to you. If you encounter any problems with your voting handset, please raise your handset in the air and a member of committee services will assist. I would like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the public attending the meeting. You are very welcome to attend and observe proceedings. However, I request politely that you do not disrupt the meeting. We move on to item 1, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of January 2024. Can I have a mover?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to move the minutes.
Second minutes, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It's got me in attendance when I actually put my apologies in, so that's just a minor error.
Thank you. We have a mover and a seconder. Can we agree the minutes? Thank you. We move to item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare an interest in relation to any item of business on the agenda? No. Thank you. We move on to item 3. Colleagues, in the view that the main focus of this morning's meeting is to set the budget and the council tax, I am seeking agreement from the council to waive standing orders to allow for the extension of the meeting to go beyond 2.5 hours. Do I have a seconder, please?
Chair, second those.
Thank you. Can I ask the council to agree this course of action? Thank you. Colleagues, robust debate is part of the democratic process. I would ask members to respect the views of others and not to point fingers during the debate. I would also remind members that it is not appropriate to shout at other councillors across the floor during the debate. We have microphones which allow everyone to be heard, so please use them when speaking. Where points of order are raised, once a ruling has been made on advice of the Head in Legal and Democratic Services, it will not be revisited. Given the business to be transacted at this morning's meeting, it says I don't have an announcement, but I have agreed. In front of you, you have a fire community. Can I ask members if they could possibly fill this in and return them? Thank you so much. So I do not intend to make any other announcements. We move on to item 4, the Leader's Report. Can I invite the Leader of the Council to present her report, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Since we last met, an order has been laid in Parliament to effect the creation of the new North East Mayoral Combined Authority. This is an important milestone in our devolution journey, paving the way for the election of a mayor on the 2nd of May. The devolution of powers and funds from Whitehall is a historic moment for the North East. It is something that has been talked about for many years, and finally we are on the cusp of making decisions closer to home. The devolution deal will allow us to deliver economic growth across County Durham and the wider North East. It will give our region and our county a stronger voice nationally and internationally. As leader of this council, I hold the interim portfolio for culture, creativity, tourism and sport on the new combined authority, and I couldn't be prouder or more excited about the opportunities that presents. The North East is truly unique. From major events recognised nationally and internationally, such as Lumiere here in Durham and the Great North Run, to breathtaking landscapes, fascinating heritage sites and award-winning attractions, not to mention international cricket and Premier League football. We have so much to offer and so much potential. Our focus is on celebrating and promoting the North East to the world, while opening up new opportunities for the people who live and work here. As we prepare to enter this historic new era, I would like to put on record my thanks to everyone across County Durham and the North East who has helped us to reach this important milestone.
Do any members have any questions on the report? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Amanda, for that report this morning. My question was specifically in relation to representation that myself, as leader of the Labour group, and the Labour's mayoral candidate, Kim McGuinness, made to government just 3 or 4 weeks ago in relation to the City Regions Transport Fund. There's comments made in the press by the leader of the council saying I was misleading and lying to people, and I wondered now whether the leader of the council wanted to thank us for the £74 million I've secured for County Durham. Thank you.
So, thank you, Councillor Marshall. No, I won't thank you for it because I think it might have something to do with the work that we've done. But I would like to say that had we had your way, we wouldn't have gotten a penny in transport money.
Can I ask the Council to note the report? We move on to item 5, questions from the public. We have no questions from the public for today's meeting. Item 6 is petitions. No petitions have been received for today's meeting. We move on to item 7, the report from the Cabinet. Can I ask the Leader of the Council to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. I present the report as tabled.
No questions have been received in respect of the report, so can I ask the Council to note the report? Thank you. We move on to item 8, the Council Plan 2024 to 2028. Can I ask the Head of Corporate Affairs to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs. Following consideration by Cabinet on the 14th of February, the Council Plan is being brought forward for approval by full Council. The plan itself is attached to Appendix 3 of the report. The current plan for this financial year was approved by Council in February last year. Following research into good practice and also taking into account draft Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities best value standards, you will note that the plan this year is much shorter and sharper than previously. The aim is to provide a consistent and easier read and an easier document to digest, but with greater access to detail of supporting strategies for the reader. This is part of a broader review of our strategy and performance arrangements, including a more transparent and focused performance reporting that you will have seen in recent quarters as the start of quarter 1. The plan covers the period 2024 to 2028 and sets out the Council's ambitions. Importantly, the plan is fully aligned with the medium-term financial plan and also embeds actions around our equalities duties in compliance with the Equalities Act 2010. The main structure of the plan is also closely aligned to the County Durham vision for 2035 and aligns to more and better jobs, people living longer and independent lives and connected communities. And in this regard, the Council Plan has 5 main ambitions: our economy, our environment, our communities, our people and our council, and that's consistent with previous years. Consultation has been undertaken on the plan, and there were both hard and soft copy consultations that ran from the 23rd of November to the 8th of January 2024, and you can see details of the consultation responses in Appendix 2. Overview and Scrutiny Management Board also received a copy of the report on the 15th of February and comments have been incorporated. Just a couple of words on some of the consultation responses and the changes to the plan that were driven by that. We've included hyperlinks in the plan, so as I say, it's a shorter summarised document. There's now hyperlinks embedded in the soft copy of the plan so that those readers who want more information can click and follow that through. And there's also a clear list of key performance indicators set out at the back of the plan so that we can be transparently linking the plan back to the Council's performance reporting. This also includes new indicators for the Office of Local Government, which, as you know, are producing national indicators for local government. The recommendations are set out in the report, and that's for the Council to consider and approve the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I have a move to the report?
As Chair, can I thank Steve for the report, his team and all the officers and elected members involved in updating the Council plan. In June 2022, Council agreed to receive an updated and refreshed Council plan on an annual basis going forward, presented to County Council alongside the MTFP and budget setting reports in February. This is the third review since that decision was taken. The Council is responsible for a wide range of public services and has a significant role to play in improving the lives of everyone who lives, visits or works in County Durham. We know that our county has both opportunities and issues that need to be addressed. Many of the issues facing our residents cannot be solved by the Council alone. Many require structural or policy changes at a national government level, but the Council can make a positive difference through our democratically elected mandate and role as a leader of place. This plan sets out the Council's ambitions for doing so. This administration also recognises the critical importance of working in partnership with others across the public, private, voluntary and community sectors. This is why the Council plan sets out the Council's role in delivering the partnership-developed County Durham Vision 2035. The updated Council plan covering the period 2024 to 2028 does not and could not include a list of everything we do, but it is underpinned by a wide range of specific strategies and service-specific action plans. I am pleased that this year's plan provides a sharper focus on the Council's ambitions with more transparent links to the detail of supporting strategies set out within the document. The plan is also an important document because it ensures that our resources are used in a transparent and effective way by setting out our priorities to support our economy, our people, our environment, our communities, and to further improve the efficiency and effectiveness of how our council works for everyone's benefit. Ultimately, it sets out ambitions and approach to directing our resources, including it in the medium-term financial plan considered by Cabinet today. Over the last year, the Joint Administration have been focusing on the delivery of things that matter to local people and local communities. Things which will support improved health, wealth and prosperity across our county. For example, the Inclusive Economic Strategy agreed in December 22 and a range of significant capital investments, as well as strides forward in terms of turning the redevelopment of Akeley Heads from a concept into reality as part of our ambitious plans for economic growth. In November 23, Ofsted carried out a focused visit looking at our arrangements for care-experienced young people. Specifically, the quality of preparation for adulthood, the quality and suitability of accommodation and care leavers with specific needs. Feedback was positive and identified that leaders have a detailed understanding of the strengths of this area of service and where further improvements can be made. Senior leaders have further developed and improved services for care-experienced young people. We have also provided a greater focus on our environment and climate emergency response plan, where we have made good progress against our ambitions. And we can be rightly proud of our county, our heritage, our people and our culture. Because of this, it is no coincidence that the County Council has been selected to lead on the culture theme on the region's devolution plans. Moving forward, we will need to maintain sound management of our resources in delivering on our ambitions and priorities. Seek to maximise the talents of our people and use technology to provide the best service possible within the resources available. To this end, the plan also sets out the key performance indicators which will be used to measure the success of the plan and the operational services that we deliver. Colleagues will note that our desire to provide transparency has been embedded in a more comprehensive performance report which has been received and commented upon by Cabinet over recent quarters. Chair, with that I move the Council accepts the report and the recommendations to approve the Council Plan 2024 to 2028.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
Thank you, Chair. And can I also thank Steve and his team for the work undertaken to refresh and simplify the Council Plan. It's now a shorter, sharper and more easily digested document than in previous years. In second in the report, I would highlight that the Council Plan is a summary of the actions taken by this Council moving forward. It's underpinned by a series of corporate strategies, service planning and performance arrangements, and together these provide a more detailed information on the actions, major projects and improvements which are being undertaken. To ensure transparency, key documents are accessible via hyperlinks that are set out within the plan. The Council Plan we are considering today sets out the actions we will lead on and take forward as a Council. It's aligned to and complements the County Durham Vision 2035 and sets out the priorities of this Council in delivering it. I'm also pleased that the Council has a clear focus on environmental matters and a clear focus on listening to our communities and local businesses. I particularly welcome the strong emphasis to our inclusive economic strategy. This sets out the unparalleled level of ambition this Council has for delivering a strong economy. We want to build an inclusive economy by creating more and better jobs in a green economy, ensuring that no one is left behind. In my own portfolio, I'm pleased to see a focus on delivering services that are modern and digital by design, whilst providing alternatives for those who are unable to access the internet. I'm also pleased that plans for building a data-driven council have been prioritised. This will support ongoing service development, innovation and value for money. And in line with the Equality Act 2010, the Council is required to set out its equality objectives and review these on a triennial basis. These objectives have been consulted upon and updated, and the updated Council Plan has a range of actions to identify and tackle discrimination, inequalities and promote good community relations. With that, I second the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the report? Can I ask the Council to agree the Council Plan? Thank you. We move on to item 9, Budget 2024-2025, report under Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003. Can I ask the Corporate Director of Resources to present the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This report fulfils our statutory responsibilities under Section 25 of the Local Government Act 2003, which states that when an authority is considering its budget and setting its council tax for the forthcoming year, its Chief Finance Officer is required to give their professional opinion to the Council on two important matters. Firstly, the robustness of the estimates made in the preparation of the budget and for the purpose of calculation of what is known as the council tax requirement, and secondly, the adequacy of the reserves allowed for in the budget proposals. As this Council's Chief Finance Officer, the arrangements I have put in place to discharge these responsibilities and my professional opinion on these matters is something which I take very seriously. This report is one of the most important reports that I present to yourselves. It gives you the assurance you need in terms of relying on the figures and the underpinning assumptions that have formed the basis of the budget proposals you are about to consider. Included in the report is an overview of your legal responsibilities as members to facilitate the setting of a balanced legal budget and the implications of not doing so. This is set out at Appendix 2 to the report, and members should note that you jointly and severally, that means collectively and individually, have a fiduciary responsibility to local council taxpayers. This means you have a legal duty to facilitate rather than obstruct the setting of a lawful budget, and you must exercise that duty by the 11th of March at the latest. In terms of the robustness of the estimates, I've set out in paragraphs 20 to 39 in the report the process that has been followed and some of the key issues underpinning the budgets and the report you're about to consider. The budget proposals presented today are the end of a long, difficult and in-depth process, and I'm happy to give my opinion that based on the work undertaken, the estimates can be considered to be robust and can be relied upon when taking your decisions today, and that adequate provision has been made for all known risks with contingencies and sufficient reserves in place for any unforeseen events that may transpire during the coming year. In the report, I have highlighted the significant inflationary pressures we are facing presently and the uncertainty that exists beyond 24-25 in terms of our future financial settlements from government. It is hard to remember a time when the Council faced so much uncertainty and the sector more widely was so stretched and challenged. I have highlighted the scale of the financial challenge that we are facing in terms of the balancing of our budgets across the coming 4 years, with the budget next year relying on the use of the medium-term financial plan support reserve to set a balanced budget once again. As members will note, the Council is facing a circa £16.8 million challenge in 25-26 to balance its budget based on the forecast you're about to consider, and a £37.8 million problem in balancing our budgets across the next 4 years, despite our MTFP planning assumptions including £16.36 million of additional savings, with £8 million of those falling into next year, and the Council maximising its council tax raising powers without a referendum across the next 4 years. During the autumn of last year, CIPFA undertook a peer review of the Council's financial management arranges and scored us a strong 3.25 out of 4, with many areas of good and best practice exemplified. One of the issues they did highlight, however, was the need to develop more savings programmes that closed and balanced the Council's MTFP gap without the need to rely on reserves, and to consider the scale and scope of the Council's capital programme ambitions given our financial outlook. In terms of the adequacy of reserves, I set out in paragraphs 40 to 57 details of the best practice guidance published by CIPFA in terms of the level, purpose and reasons for holding reserves. I've included this part of the report, the Council's position in terms of the CIPFA Financial Resilience Index, which is a series of indicators that are used as an early warning system for authorities in potential financial distress. What these indicators show is that the Council, relative to other councils of our type and size, has had a higher reduction in its reserves over the last 3 years, and that our overall level of reserves is just above average for all unitary authorities. In the current year, our forecasts indicate that there will be a further £30 million reduction in our earmarked reserves this year. So I expect our position to change when the Resilience Index is published based on the position to the 31st of March 24. The budget proposals you are about to consider include the utilisation of £3.72 million of the MTFP support reserve to balance the budget next year, and the MTFP support reserve after we've utilised that £3.72 million will be £23.248 million to support 25-26 and beyond. As members will be aware, utilising reserves to balance recurrent expenditure is not a sustainable long-term budget strategy. However, the use of £3.72 million of the MTFP support reserve to balance the budget next year will buy the Cabinet more time to develop more sustainable budget solutions to implement from 25-26 onwards. I am satisfied, therefore, that this is appropriate and proportionate, and have confidence that the more sustainable solutions will be developed over the coming months. The recommended policy on reserves, taking all these factors into account, is set out at paragraph 58 of the report, and I am wholly satisfied that earmarked reserves that we hold have been set aside for specific legitimate purposes. In conclusion, Chair, in my professional opinion, if the Council were to accept the Cabinet's budget proposals, including its proposals in terms of council tax increases next year, which are in line with the Government's expectations, that I am satisfied that the risks identified in the budget setting process, alongside our strong track record in managing our finances, means that despite the clear challenges that are to come, that we have adequate reserves as we move forward, though our overall resilience has reduced. The recommendations, Chair, are set out at section 9 of the report, which are for Council to have regard to this report and my professional opinion and views when considering and improving the budget and the level of council tax for 24-25. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak on the report? Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. Sir, firstly, Paul, just before I put my question, just thanks to you and all of the officers in your service team, and a special mention to Jeff Garfoot, who's due to leave the authority shortly after a long period with us where he's been a stalwart for this county, looking after the public purse. Paul, I just wondered, as part of your report, you talked about the necessity to set a legal budget at the latest by the 11th of March. I'm just wondering if you could just explain to members the process if a budget isn't agreed today that gets us to the 11th of March, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Marshall. So if the budget doesn't get passed today, the contingency plan that we've been discussing with the monitoring officer would be that Council would need to be clear on the reasons why the budget wasn't agreed today, and therefore sort of charge the Cabinet with reconsidering their proposals. There would be a meeting of the Cabinet next Wednesday, so a week today, and we'll be looking to reconvene a council meeting on Friday afternoon, a week on Friday, which would be the 8th of March in advance. Leaving it to the 11th of March leaves it incredibly tight to be able to do the annual billing run to get the bills out so that they hit the doormats for us to give the legal amount of notice period to take the direct debits on the 1st of April. So really, whilst legally it's the 11th of March, the intention would be that we'd reconvene council and have that meeting on the 8th of March on the afternoon.
Okay. No other questions? Can I thank you for the report? Can I ask the Council to note the statement when approving the budget and setting the level of the council tax for 2024-2025? Agreed? Before we move on to the next item, can I remind the Council that under paragraph 14.6 of the Council Procedure Rules, recorded votes will take place for each of the budget and council tax items. Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, agenda items 10 and 11 in relation to the budget and council tax setting are inextricably linked. Therefore, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 11C, I move a motion without notice that items 10 and 11 are considered together. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
Second that, Chair.
Councillor Sexton.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I was pressing my button, but I wanted to say something on the budget. If it's, I know it's passed, but
on the Section 25 report.
Sorry.
On the Section 25 report.
Are we going to get a chance to speak about them on the whole, or we're going to vote against the three like we usually do now?
Sorry, I'm not quite clear on the question.
So I was going to speak on the MTFP, but my handset wasn't working. So I'm just, now that Councillor Hood stood up, and we usually bring all three together and go to the vote, is that vote happening now? So I won't have an opportunity to speak.
No, so we're going to move, Councillor Hood's moved the motion without notice to deal with the two items together, and then the leader and deputy leader will be invited to move and second the budget. Councillor Croot will be brought in as the Chair of Corporate Overview and Scrutiny, and that opens the debate, and that's the point at which you register to speak on it. Just a reminder to everybody, if you are having problems with your handsets, wave your arm at us and the team will come round and assist, just so we don't miss anybody. Thank you. Did we get a second?
Did we have a second? Councillor MacDonald, okay. You seconded? Thank you. Does the Council agree the motion to take the two items together? Agreed. I'd hand over to Helen to explain the process now.
Thank you, Chair. So, considering the two items together impacts upon the length of time that members can speak, and it effectively doubles the time that group leaders, movers and seconders can speak. So, the mover of the motion and all group leaders have 10 minutes. The exception to that is Councillor Bell, because although he is a group leader, he will be seconding the proposals in his capacity as Deputy Leader of the Council and Portfolio Holder for Finance. So he will have 6 minutes. All other speakers have 3 minutes, and then the leader will have a 6-minute right of reply before we vote on items 10 and 11. The deadline for amendments was noon on the 23rd of February, and none have been submitted. So the usual rules of debate apply. Each member can speak once on the proposals, except the leader, who, as I said, has had the 6-minute right of reply before we go to the vote. And as the Chair has indicated, we will take 2 separate votes for items 10 and 11, and they will be recorded. So the way in which you vote will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Members, before we move on to the next item, can I just remind us all to be respectful to each other during this debate. What we don't want to see is disrespect for anyone. So items 10 and 11 of the Medium-Term Financial Plan 2024-2025 to 27-28 and the Revenue and Capital Budget for 2024 and 2025 and council tax setting in order to meet the County Council's tax requirement for 2024-2025. Can I ask the Leader of the Council to present and move the report?
Thank you, Chair. I move the Cabinet's budget proposals for 24-25 and to outline the medium-term financial plan forecasts for the period 24-25 to 27-28. These proposals are the culmination of months and months of hard work in what has proven to be difficult circumstances for the Council and the wider sector. At each stage, we have sought to involve scrutiny in the budget setting process, and the report includes details of the feedback from those meetings, the most recent one being the 15th of February, and from 2 rounds of wider engagement through our AAPs and through engagement with business ratepayers and with trade unions, plus other partners and stakeholders across the autumn of last year. The budget has been prepared against a backdrop of significant, unavoidable inflationary and demand pressures in our budgets, particularly in social care and home-to-school transport, and in the context of significant uncertainty over the future funding settlements beyond next year for this Council and the wider sector. We have seen the continuation of one-year settlements and late announcements on funding from government, and as welcome as they are, it is not conducive to effective financial planning. The report provides a comprehensive overview of the budget pressures we are facing, the announcements made in the autumn statement in November last year, and the local government finance settlement, which was subsequently published, including the additional funding that was announced on the 24th of January. In the 24-25 budget, we have needed to make provision for uplifts to address a range of unavoidable inflationary pressures and to address overspends in the current year's budget, particularly for pay inflation and for placement costs for children that we need to look after. As one would expect, the cost pressures in adults and children's social care, which are by far the largest budgets the Council has, are enormous. The 9.8% increase in the national living wage from April has significant bearing on our adult social care contracts in particular. The cost pressures in children and adult social care totals nearly £36 million next year. The additional revenue generated from an increase in the adult social precept and the additional specific grant funding for these areas fall well short of the cost pressures we face, mainly due, as we all know, to our low tax raising capacity, a matter we are consistently raising with government. We need to increase our home-to-school transport budgets by a further £2.5 million next year, which will mean that our spending on home-to-school transport will have trebled in the space of 5 years to around £32 million, an issue facing many county councils. There is a further £12 million of budget growth factored into the budget for looked after children placement costs. £9 million of this is to address the overspend this year, despite increasing the budget by £18 million last year. Also included in the budget next year is £2.6 million to cover the shortfall in housing benefit subsidy in relation to temporary and specialist supported housing, effectively a cost shunt from the DWP to local authorities, something that has been flagged by the National Audit Office and an issue we have also lobbied government strongly on. Whilst the vast majority of the spending pressures we face next year are unavoidable, there are some limited policy-led investments factored into the base budget, including a £1 million base budget pressure linked to our employability service, to offset the reduction in funding we face as a result of the move from European Social Fund funding to the new UK Shared Prosperity funding. £300,000 to permanently fund the Find and Fix team that is being funded on a non-recurrent basis from reserves, and £275,000 to strengthen our information and data governance team, as well as £257,000 to expand the park and ride service to better support the Akeley Head site. In overall terms, we face spending pressures totalling nearly £62 million next year, inclusive of the £10 million use of the MTFP support reserve in the current year. Of course, with such high cost pressures, allied with a level of uncertainty that exists beyond next year, we have had to think carefully about the affordability of our capital investment aspirations. Across the MTFP planning period, we have made provision for additional £12.7 million of borrowing costs. There are many things we'd like to do, but we only have limited resources available, and therefore we have had to make some difficult decisions with regards to new capital investments. Despite the challenging financial position we have had to contend with, alongside continued construction price inflation and heightened cost of borrowing risk, the budget nevertheless includes an ambitious capital programme with around £93 million of new additional investment proposed, including further significant investment in our schools, highways, bridge infrastructure, new children's homes, looked after children's sufficiency strategy and our leisure transformation project. This will bring the total capital programme across the period of 24-25 to 27-28 to just under £550 million. A huge investment at a time of significant budget challenges, but a programme that is fully funded and certainly demonstrates that Durham is not closed for business. The uncertainty over our funding settlements from 2025-26 onwards casts an ominous shadow over our medium-term financial planning, and there are undoubtedly some significant challenges beyond that. The savings proposals included in the budget are largely in line with the proposals that were consulted upon across the back end of last year. I'd like to thank everyone involved in those consultations and for the deliberations by the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. We simply cannot raise sufficient income tax from council tax to fund the council tax to fund the cost pressures we face, and the government is not meeting the gap, meaning we're constantly having to find savings just to stand still. The total identified savings across MTFP 14 planned period are £16.36 million, with £8 million falling into next year. The budget proposals include council tax increases in line with the government's expectations. They take into account the council core referendum limits and the adult social care precepting powers, which are for an additional 2% next year. The clear expectations from government is that these increases are applied, and the recommendations from our Section 151 officer is that we implement them. Not implementing them means bigger reductions in spending next year. Increasing the council tax is a decision that should not be taken lightly, and in considering this, we must recognise the squeeze on the cost of living at this time. However, not increasing council tax is simply not a sustainable or prudent strategy to adopt, and as Paul has outlined earlier, we all have a responsibility to set a balanced budget. Every 1% of council tax increase applied generates around £2.65 million of additional funding. To put it bluntly, it's a binary choice between increasing the council tax or increasing the scale of the budget deficit and the savings and efficiencies. Assuming that Council does agree the council tax increase is set out in the report, the budget shortfall next year will be £3.72 million, rising to £37.833 million over the next 4-year period. Achieving further savings of this magnitude will still be challenging. Many councils are already on the brink. Not all of those are down to bad decisions or making bad decision-making or poor governance. Many well-run councils are getting to the point where they are close to Section 114 territory. Thankfully, we are not at that stage. The overall system, in my opinion, is broken and we need urgent reform if councils like us are to survive and thrive going forward. The problem is that none of the leading parties are committed to increasing the funding available to councils at this stage. The additional funding we will receive from government next year is significant, but just not enough. The additional funding announced on the 24th of January has helped reduce our reliance on reserves. Had it not been for that, we would have had 5.9 million more to take out this year. As is always the case, the estimates beyond next year are more indicative and will undoubtedly change. Work has already started on developing options to address these challenges so that we can consider what further savings will be required beyond that. It is important that we follow the advice of our Section 151 officer in terms of the sufficiency of our reserves. Those councils that don't listen to the statutory officer's advice are the ones who find themselves in difficulty. So the latest forecast indicates that our earmarked and cash limit reserves will reduce by a further 30 million this year to just over 161 million pounds. It is simply not sustainable to underpin a budget indefinitely from reserves. The report also includes details of the various dedicated schools block, the Teachers' Pay Award grant and the High Needs Send. The recommendations are summarised at paragraph 53 and I can confirm that they satisfy our statutory requirements with regards to the budget setting, include the declaration of forecast deficit on the collection fund. Chair, I move the recommendations of both reports and in doing so would like to place on record my thanks to Paul and his team and the budget managers right across the council for the work undertaken to get us here today. And I'd also like to place on record thanks to Jeff Garfoot. Thank you.
Second both reports and recommendations, Chair, but reserve the right to speak after other contributions to the debate.
Thank you. Before I bring in the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Management Board and open the debate, do any members have any questions of the Corporate Director of Resources on the proposals outlined in items 10 and 11? Now we will move into the debate. Can I invite Councillor Rob Crute to speak as the Chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board?
Thanks, Chair. As Chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board and on behalf of board members, I welcome the opportunity to scrutinise the Cabinet's budget proposals and the revenue and capital budget for 24-25. It's a priority, of course, for the Management Board to scrutinise the MTFP and budget, do that diligently and constructively. The Board received 4 Cabinet reports on the development of the MTFP between September 2023 and earlier this month, and we fed back our views on each occasion. At our last meeting, held on the 15th of February, we undertook detailed scrutiny of the Cabinet's final budget proposals. The Board had quite a robust challenge and debate over the plans, and at this point I'd like to thank Jeff Garfoot for the comprehensive way he responded to all of our questions and comments. All the points raised by the Board are set out in paragraph 2006 to 2010 of the report in front of us this morning, but I would like to highlight a number of key concerns raised by board members as part of the process. They include the government's decision to use £20 billion of fiscal headroom to finance tax cuts and provide business incentives instead of responding to calls from recognised bodies such as SAGOMA, the LGA and the County Councils Network and many others to adequately fund local council and public services. The continued absence of a long-term financial settlement for local government, continued pressures on key budget areas including pay awards, energy costs, high interest rates, inflationary cost pressures and increasing demands, particularly across children and young people services, including home to school transport, children looked after and children with special educational needs and disabilities. The additional funding announced by government in January 2024, whilst welcome, goes absolutely nowhere near far enough to address cost pressures or reduce the need for budget savings. The government's assumption that councils will increase council tax by the maximum amount permissible risks putting more cost pressures onto hard-pressed local taxpayers who are already suffering from a prolonged cost of living crisis.
1 minute, Councillor.
Choices facing local government to balance budgets and the risk that non-statutory services may have to bear the brunt of cuts. Examples of these services providing much needed support to the most vulnerable members in our communities include the Household Support Fund, welfare rights, welfare assistance and the local council tax reduction scheme. Whilst the large capital programme is acknowledged, this comes at a risk of adding further pressure on the council's revenue budget through the higher cost of borrowing. For that reason, it's considered essential that prudent management of the capital programme is undertaken. And finally, Chair, we express disappointment at the continued delay in the leisure transformation programme coming to scrutiny and concerns about the risk of delaying this much needed programme in terms of its impact on public health improvement and the promotion of physical activity. So, Chair, that's a brief summary of comments made by scrutiny, and I look forward to the board having early involvement in the process next year. If the Constitution allows, I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sexton, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. Paul Sexton, Chester Street South. I acknowledge that setting the budget is extremely complex, and I thank Paul and the team for providing us with the information. They're more experienced than I am, so like most, I'm a layman in that field. But equally, it's extremely difficult for councillors to review, digest such a complex budget, work with colleagues to come up with any amendments, which was a pretty tight deadline, and I understand the reasons why, but I would ask, maybe if we'd done it the month before, we wouldn't have such a pressured deadline. I don't know if that's legal or not, but it's a question anyway. The information churn has been slow throughout the year when we've asked for information on financials, although that seemed to have speeded up. Scrutiny chairs have told me that it's been difficult to get financial details, and sometimes they felt ignored. We've also got a huge capital programme, and it's not clear what could be spiralling out of control. I hear that the MAG, Museum and Art Gallery, is now in excess of 20 million, which is around 5 or 6 million what was agreed in 2021. And from a parochial perspective, Chair, Cheshire Street was promised a new £17 million leisure centre in 2021. And the leader herself said on Politics North a few weeks ago that to help rejuvenate high streets we needed a leisure retail. The officer's feasibility study told us that Cheshire Street was over 50 years old, needed replacement, shouldn't have money spent on it, good money after bad, etc., and needed to be in a better catchment area. Cheshire Street was agreed before Woodhouse, but now it appears that Cheshire Street has been cancelled because there's no money, but Woodhouse is going ahead. Now, I applaud the people in Woodhouse Close, good luck. We also have £350,000, excess of £350,000
1 minute, Councillor.
in car parking in Chester Street, which goes out of the town. And as I mentioned before, 100,000 of the event money is given to Durham County Cricket Ground. That in itself would help us. We missed out on levelling up, and I'll be doing an email about that in the future. I'm asking people to remember we have some rainy day money here and the roof's pouring in. And I'd ask my fellow councillors to basically consider what we're doing here today when we've got reserves, above average reserves still. It doesn't get any worse than having a pandemic which we're all still recovering from. We're suffering from it, as we've just heard, but so is the members of the public, and then a cost of living crisis on top. This is their money in reserves. This is their money, not ours. And I would urge people to think that before they make a judgment today. Thank you, Chair, and that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Thanks, Chair. And just before I get into the bones of my speech on today's budget, I just want to make it clear that whereby I accept the brilliant job the officers have done in making sure that this budget is balanced within the financial envelope, I just want to make it clear to all members here today there is political choices within that financial envelope about where the priorities of this council lie, and that's what I have question with today. Chair, I just want to start by quoting from a report back in 2023 entitled Health, Wealth and Unequal Opportunities to Thrive. It was published by the County Durham Community Foundation and the Health Equality North, and it set out the dire impact of public service cuts and economic mismanagement for the people of our county. In the foreword, the outgoing Bishop of Durham, Reverend Paul Butler, described County Durham as an area of dramatic beauty and significant hardships. And he's right. Following 14 years of Tory cuts and broken promises on levelling up, and 3 years of mismanagement under this council's administration, inequalities across County Durham have grown, and for many, hope and opportunity lost. The report today sets out evidence showing that at the end of the first decade of Tory cuts, life expectancy and healthy life expectancy in the North East were in decline. A crisis in County Durham fuelled by government cuts and compounded by inflation and a government cost of living crisis. The facts are chilling. Unemployment rates are higher, wages are lower, and there are fewer jobs available in County Durham than elsewhere in the country. Poverty is much worse in our region than in the rest of the country. Children in our region are more likely to be living in poverty than in their peers in the rest of the country. The North East has the highest number of children living in poverty. It's an absolute disgrace that here in County Durham, 38.7% of children are living in poverty, more than 10% higher than the national figure. The number of people with conditions such as depression, stroke, heart disease, cancer and dementia is at least 10% higher here in County Durham. The health gap between County Durham and other parts of the country has grown. Male life expectancy in County Durham has fell by 6 months between 2015 and 2020, with female life expectancy in parts of our region fallen by over a year in the same period. It's a stark contrast with wealthier places like Westminster, Kensington and Chelsea, where life expectancy has actually increased by around a year. As the Bishop of Durham said, while we have some of the most beautiful scenery, strong heritage and outstanding cultural assets, we face significant hardships. And for many of our residents facing those hardships, our local services offer an absolute lifeline, and in some cases a way out of the cycle of poverty that holds them back. Today's budget is about priorities, and today, Chair, this coalition has laid out clear the priorities for all to see. Money pulled from those residents and communities facing significant hardship and challenged into some of the most beautiful areas of County Durham. The contrast between Labour and the Lib Dem Tories in County Durham has never been more stark. Labour, the party of working people, focused on need, on evidence-led policy making, on putting the poorest and most vulnerable first. And the Tory Lib Dems putting their own re-election before their financial and moral responsibilities to the county as a whole, specifically the most vulnerable who rely on local services so much. We all know that local government is in an uncertain state. Our councils and our brilliant hard-working officers have suffered on the front line of austerity since 2010. We're seeing councils fall one after another, and the LG expects more to follow in the years ahead. Since 2010, our council has endured £250,000 worth of cuts per year, and has cost people jobs, seen services stripped to the bone or terminated altogether. Our schools and public buildings have been held together by sticky tape and prayers as investment's been choked off. If you don't believe us, speak to our police, fire officers, teachers, nurses, doctors, and the people who we employ here who've been left to work in a building that's fallen apart around them. Since 2010, when Cameron and Clegg set about decimating public services, our Labour group and our Labour MPs have argued strongly for better, fairer ways of funding councils. But we've also, Chair, got on with the difficult job of cutting our cloth to suit. It was hard. We had to make tough decisions. We reformed local services. We were bold with some of the decisions in the way that we provided council buildings, accommodation, and we reinvested reserves into local infrastructure like our leisure transformation programme. We looked after the public purse. We put all County Durham communities first. And in 2021, Chair, we handed over a council that had sound financial resilience and was politically competent and well led. Under this coalition, we haven't seen leadership. We've seen decisions kicked down the road by cabinet members reluctant to make difficult choices, or decisions made by a small few rather than the many across the county. money poured into Durham City Centre and the leader's own ward, promises to the people of the county on leisure broken, pleading poverty to the public on one hand and putting another 8.8 million quid onto the council's credit card on the other. Put simply, Chair, this council leadership has spent too much, they've borrowed too much, and they've doled out money for their own political priorities rather than putting our communities first. The council spent more reserves, 90 million in fact, in the past 3 years than any other similar authority in the country. They've even earmarked 5 million quid in next year's capital programme to demolish County Hall, but they haven't got anywhere for the staff to go. This budget cuts services whilst gambling on more income through charges and fines in outlying areas. Just weeks ago, Chair, this council voted unanimously for a review of parking charges. They're now baked into this budget today for the next year, and any review simply won't have the resources to pay for going back. They've introduced new parking charges across Durham's heritage coast, something that will impact on local residents and businesses most and deter visitors coming into the area. They've scrapped 2 new leisure centres they promised in Chesley Street and Seaham, with no budget for Meadowfield or Shildon. And of course, Abbey Leisure Centre, the leader's own leisure centre, was delivered first and at double the expected budget.
Chair, can I have a point of order on that, please? That's fine, I have got no problem with that, but it was Councillor Marshall as a portfolio holder who put that Abbey Leisure Centre at the front of the investment under the leisure transformation.
Councillor, it's not a point of order.
Sorry, Chair, can I continue? Thank you. The evidence speaks for itself. It's all there. It's simply wrong to cut leisure and frontline community services while child poverty and mortality rates are going up and health equality soar. Over the past 12 months, there's been over £1 million spent from a regeneration reserve to fund cultural events and a programme in Durham City Centre. Over half of that cultural budget was spent in the city centre itself on projects that weren't funded at the beginning of the year. The Cabinet are planning on spending £23 million on a fancy restaurant and art gallery, a project branded as the reopen of the DLI, when their own press releases just last week confirmed again that the DLI archives and collection will in fact open at the Story in June. It's about time they came clean with the public. This pet project is a complete waste of taxpayers' money, has no business plan or business case, and adds additional budget pressures of £600,000 per year at least to this council's revenue budget. While culture funding has been poured into Durham City Centre, there's been a consultation about reducing the cultural offer in outlying areas. There's a staffing structural review there. If anybody wants a copy of that, that was commenced in May, about reducing cultural venues in Bishop Auckland and in Concert. The council's leaders have promised not to hike up council tax before the election, but with the 70 million proceeds from the sale of the HQ building at the Sands nowhere to be seen, it's certainly not been spent in my community. Here we are again with a 5% council tax hike, and where's the 70 million quid gone? I know members of this council from across various political groupings are not happy with the proposals before us today, and I want to be crystal clear. In the Labour group, we take our responsibilities as councillors extremely seriously. We want to make sure that this council sets a balanced budget, but it can't be this one in front of us today. Our group, as ever, is willing to sit down with the council's leadership and talk seriously about the policy and priorities of this authority. We need to set a budget that deals with the difficult issues we all face, invests in the future, and targets resources at need. No more of the leaders' political pet projects. We need to start looking at how the new £74 million of funding received for transport can help free up capital money to put some of those projects that have been promised back in and to balance the books. We should be investing in our communities to tackle health inequalities, child poverty, and improve opportunities right across the whole of our county. But, Chair, this budget fails to do that. On that basis, Chair, I urge everyone to vote against the budget today so we can all get our heads together around the table and agree a fair budget for the whole of County Durham that deals with the significant hardships the Bishop of Durham highlights. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find it really difficult this morning, and I'm very disappointed that this budget does not help any of our villagers. small villages. I talk about the Ludwits, the Wheatley Hill, the Thorney and the Trimdens, and the Haswell which I represent. I do believe that they've been forgotten, and I think it's important I make sure their voice is heard this morning. I do believe they've been hard hit once again. I asked the Joint Administration when they're going to sort out the empty vacant buildings which blight our villages. At the villages I represent are full of blight. There's no fancy projects and there's no frills or fancy events. There's nothing in this budget for our villages. The communities are in urgent need of investment and help to improve the fabric of our village and neighbourhoods. Wheatley Hill, we worked extremely hard, and I know I've knocked on lots of officers' doors and councillors' doors in relation to this. We produced a development plan, and it was developed over 3 years ago, and I'm still waiting for a penny to be spent in Wheatley Hill Front Street to make them improvements. We're struggling hard to even get the safety gates on the back of the boarded up houses and the shops on that particular Front Street. No finance, nothing in the budget. It's nothing in this budget that delivers anything within our small villages. Residents failed yet again and let down. They've been left behind by this council. This budget does not help the communities or the residents that I represent. The budget is not helping any of the villages in this county. And I say wider than my particular area, although I represent them villages spoke about. The budget's not fair and it lacks vision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Halls. Councillor Stacey Denali.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stacey Denali, Blackhall's Division. I can't begin to cover in detail all of the concerns I have around children and young people's services in 3 minutes. We all know that this area is facing huge challenges and we're having to look at stretching ever-shrinking budgets. On paper, you could say that children and young people's services are receiving more funding, but is this really the case when we take into consideration inflation, pay increases and the demographic pressures we face? We also know that this increase in funding is not new funding, but money taken from other high priority areas. When setting our budget, we need to take into consideration the situation we find ourselves in and ask ourselves if we're making the best decisions to benefit the residents of County Durham. We know that we have unprecedented increases in demand for social care, increases in the number of education and healthcare plans, and unfunded changes to council responsibilities. Looked after children's services are facing £12 million of increased costs despite the increase in social care grant. The number of children moving into social care is increasing, with more children needing to be placed in private care homes or out of county, costing the council more. The High Needs Block is looking at a £67 million shortfall over the next 4 years, a deficit that is currently not reported as part of the main general revenue position due to an accounting override and could put the council in a very precarious position. The RAC situation still continues to cause concern, and from just looking across the field, we can see the impact and disruption this has caused to so many children who attend schools that have been affected. We know that the financial situation is difficult in schools and that schools are facing more cuts. Then we have the added pressures of the expanding entitlement for early years that will come into effect in April. We have issues with sufficiency and workforce recruitment in social care, with educational psychologists,
1 minute,
in schools and in early years settings. And yet, what does this proposed budget do to address all of this? I can tell you, absolutely nothing. We have challenges with sufficiency across social care and SEND provision, and yet here we are trying to decide whether to spend money on vanity projects. We have the opportunity and potential to address these challenges with this budget, to look at prioritising money for projects that will benefit the most vulnerable people in County Durham. And we sit here with a budget report that prioritises an art gallery and a high-end restaurant. We have the foresight of knowing what challenges we face, and yet by voting for this budget, we are just sitting on our hands. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and I do apologise for the mispronunciation of your second name. I will get it right eventually. Councillor Eddie Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Eddie Adam, Aycliffe West Division. I draw members' attention to the Cabinet's unfair and unjust corporate savings proposal identified in the Medium-Term Financial Plan 14 on page 180. The proposal to cut £750,000 from Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme grant to town and parish councils over 3 years is tantamount to robbing the less well-off to support a unitary authority that has lost control of its spending. Chair, like all other local authorities, town and parish councils have and are suffering from increases in a wide range of unavoidable costs and have cut their budgets to meet these demands. The last thing they need is for this principal authority to punish them and their communities by withdrawing income and expanding double taxation. The Cabinet's own Equality Impact Assessment on page 186, paragraph 360-361 identifies, and I quote, is likely to adversely impact across the protected characteristics as it restricts investment and or could lead to increased town and parish precepts. Therefore, I do believe the Cabinet understands its actions. It will be detrimental to our communities and force town and parish councils to raise council tax above reasonable levels. The Cabinet report of the 15th of November, Appendix 4, shows at least 14 town and parish councils as adversely impacted and need to raise additional council tax, ranging from approximately 4% to 11%. It seems to me that this Lib Dem Tory Cabinet are using current government tactics, covering up their disastrous policies and pushing the blame and higher taxes onto the lower tier councils. Chair and members, there have been two phases of consultation. Both phases highlight the concerns with reducing the grant to town and parish councils. So where could further savings be made? The answer came from the consultations. They identified other areas of savings such as the culture sector. They said festivals and events should be self-financing, like the Durham City-based Lumiere to save over £1 million in use of reserves. Reviewing other council-run events could save an additional £500,000 through increased sponsorship, for example, Durham Regatta and Durham City Run. I therefore ask the Cabinet to think again on the proposed cut to Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme grant and identify other possible savings in the MTFP 14 to maintain a balanced budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Alison Beattie.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Alison Beattie, Pelton Division. As Shadow Portfolio Lead for Culture, Tourism and Leisure, there are so many elements of this budget that concern me. While I accept there is an intentional lack of recognition by central government of the funding needs of local authorities, what we see today appears to be a postcode lottery as to which divisions within the county the leadership choose to invest in and which are ignored. For example, in Chesley Street, the nearest town to my division, we had promises of a new leisure centre. We were told by officers during the extensive consultation exercise that the current one is in the wrong location, is no longer suitable as it's over 50-year-old and not fit for purpose. Hence, the solution was to a new build. The location had full support from the community, yet now we are being told this is not possible, and a refurbishment of the existing facility is now the only option available. This is going to be a very difficult message to give to residents, especially balancing this against Abbey Sports Centre, with refurbishments costing double the original allocated budget, coming in at just under £5 million. This, coupled with the fact that we are seeing no mention of any plans coming forward for the Riverside complex in Chesley Street, or the Rosebery Plainfield site in Pelton, which was meant to be the football hub for North Durham when I committed neighbourhood budget to the change in facility. But that in itself is another subject for another day. What is relevant is the results of the consultation commissioned in December 22 into the leisure offer in and around Chesley Street, which has not been published and now 12 months on may not reflect the current sporting needs or usage in that area. But the fact there is no allocated spend against these projects in this budget speaks volumes. Then, as outlined in 2021 Cabinet report, we have Seaham that was in line to get in a new leisure centre and swimming pool, Shildon and Meadowfield that were meant to be undergoing refurbishment, yet we now have Spennymoor, Woodhouse Close and Teesdale becoming beneficiaries of new leisure facilities, all while we are told by Public Health in their 10-year report that physical and mental health is a priority, yet clearly not for Chesley Street, where neither of the local facilities are getting what was promised.
1 minute, Councillor.
So, only a priority in some locations, it would seem. This is all while we look to invest 23 million in the former DLI building used in reserves and regional devolution money to invest in a high-end tree where no doubt most County Durham families will not be able to afford to eat, and in development a conference facility, while secretly planning to reduce leisure and culture across other facilities outside the city. I am told we need conference facilities to support developing business in Akeley Heads, all when that development has not happened due to County Hall still being here. But the real issue in relation to this location is disturbing the ashes of fallen military heroes on the former museum site, something that many of you on the opposite side of the chamber stated was something you would protect in election promises prior to the last election. We already have the story, which opens in June, which is well documented in this chamber and publicised in press releases. How is it right that we have over half of the culture budget allocated in Durham City into 2 food festivals in Bishop Auckland and Seaham, all while resident responses and consultations suggest prices you've given elsewhere? I stand up for the residents of Chesley Street and the wider county. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rob York.
Thanks, Chair. Rob York from West Auckland Electoral Division. Durham County Council has endured a triple whammy. More borrowing than ever before, the highest use of reserves of any neighbouring local authority, and cut after cut after cut to public services. Something that has been ongoing since David Cameron and Nick Clegg took power back in 2010, and maintained, I might add, by successive Tory governments. So what does this mean after 14 years of Tory governments and £250 million worth of cuts to Durham County Council? Well, it means even more cuts. The latest MTFP 14 savings show an increase in fees and charges in community protection, an increase in fees and charges within environmental services, higher fees for allotment holders, £500,000 in cuts in 25-26, 26-27 for review of local networks, increase in charges for pest control, massive cuts earmarked for clean and green, meaning fewer street sweepers, and cuts to street wardens, cuts front-loaded, I might add, until just after the next county elections, cuts to neighbourhood wardens, and this means cuts to jobs. How many of the 48 wardens will be made redundant and in whose area? Cuts at a time when some of the most vulnerable residents within our county can't put food on the table, can't pay the mortgage or eat their homes. Yet amidst all of this, this local authority can find millions of pounds for an art gallery and posh restaurant in Durham City, whilst other towns and villages are seeing services slashed and bus service, including bus services, meaning residents are isolated. Consultancy fees within this authority are at a record high, whilst overseeing millions of pounds being spent on bids that will fail, even before pen has been put to paper. It's a catalogue of disaster at the top, and after all this, we're still seeing record increases in council tax and the social care precept stealth tax, which George Osborne introduced. Well, they say a week's a long time in politics. I can tell you 3 years is even longer, and it's time for change. This council isn't just stagnating, it's going backwards.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kevin Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo the thanks to our finance officers, indeed all our officers, for their professionalism. Any criticism I may make is directed at the political choices that are made and never at the officers who then have to deliver them. As this will be the last budget before the local elections next May, the choices and impact of those choices today are stark and very clear. Obviously, I won't be supporting this budget as the choices that are being made are clearly based upon ensuring the coalition's continued political survival and delivering in specific places and not the needs of residents across the whole county. This budget is saying no to new build leisure facilities in Chester Street and Seaham. We will probably get some new curtains and a lick of paint. There's no money in the capital programme. We can't afford that one. That's a political decision. 6 Labour councils in Seaham, that's why you've pulled the plug. In my ward, in Dordon, we have over 40% of the children living in poverty. But it's even worse than that. The Leisure Transformation Report hasn't even been to Cabinet. It was expected 2 years ago, 18 months ago, definitely by last spring. It will be in by the autumn. It's going to be in by December. It will be in February. And it will come after this budget as a fait accompli. The former DLI building, well over £23 million of additional capital spend. We can't afford that one. And this is to spend additional capital on an already failed business model, as it's receiving revenue support before the doors even open of more than £600,000 a year. To extend the footprint of the building, it is understood that ex-servicemen's remains and those of other family members who may be laid to rest are going to be relayed, tipped somewhere else with no knowledge or understanding of where they may lie. Car parking charges introduced in Seaham with the specific intention stated on the public record to reduce visitor numbers and therefore increase the availability of car parking spaces. You really couldn't make that one up. And 98% of the consultees who responded and who were against the proposals dismissed as irrelevant. Is that to support the continuing economic regeneration of the town centre? Why not just increase the car parking spaces as was proposed
1 minute,
as part of a leisure transformation? During 22-23, 126 people were found rough sleeping with an average 11 a night, and almost half of them were new to rough sleeping. And here we are 3 years through the council's house build programme, introduced in 21, with not a single house being built, and the delivery of affordable housing every year around 50% lower than it should be, because housing isn't a priority in this council. I welcome the additional funding which has been announced, but we need more housing, not emergency measures. The council's HQ, the lights are on, but almost no one's in. There's a simile. It's just as well because some are still in because there's nowhere for them to go. Chair, this coalition has used the highest use of reserves over the last 3 years in comparison to our statistical neighbours, and we have seen an above-average reduction in reserves compared to all other unitary authorities, because difficult decisions have not been made and now lie in the long grass. In closing, Chair, I won't be supporting this budget and will be voting against it. And we do have an alternative, which, if this is defeated today, will form the basis of a fairer, more inclusive use of the Council's finances based upon need, not political advantage.
Councillor Curtis Bahari. And I do apologise if I got that
No,
wrong.
you got it completely right, Chair. Thank you. I wanted to focus specifically on the funding cuts to town and parish councils. This budget proposes a 50% reduction in the LCTRS grant. If you look at who actually receives this grant, you'll see it's some of the most deprived areas across the county. Ferry Hill, for example, the ward I represent, receives £170,000. So we would lose £85,000 every year. And for anyone that doesn't know what kind of cut means to Ferry Hill, let me just quickly explain. If we get rid of our entire events programme, our community support grants and our benefits advice service, it wouldn't even get us halfway to the money that we need to find. Now, of course, Ferry Hill's not the only area. Trimdon, Shildon, Aycliffe. Aycliffe is set to lose £100,000 a year under this proposal. But for the resident, if luckily enough, if you live in Barnard Castle or Framwell Gateway, you're not affected by this decision. But for residents that are affected, such as my residents, they're faced with another tax hike to cover the loss. And that's because of a decision made by this joint administration. But the most frustrating aspect, I think, is this narrative that times are tough and difficult decisions must be made. Because in essence it's true, but this is the complete opposite of that. This council is taking the easy decision by passing the buck to town and parishes to make the difficult decision. And that's exactly what they've criticised the government for. Now, for those that might say, what would Labour do? I think the most important thing for this is when this was a Labour-run council, this funding to our communities was protected every single year. And that was despite Cameron and Clegg decimating our budget. 3 years into this joint administration, it's been taken away. So I believe this is a massive important issue for this budget, and it affects a lot of members. So I would urge all members to think about your communities when this goes to the vote. I won't be supporting the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Christine Vorty.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Glasses on. I would like to speak to you all about the CIC, Children in Care, looked after children. This area faces a lot of demographic pressures. High increase in children going into care, poor recruitment of social workers, lack of foster placements and also care home placements. Placing children in private care or out of area costs the council much more than placing them with in-house provision. The council is facing 12 million of increased costs to these services. Despite an additional 9.4 million social care grant, an additional 5.8 million, this still falls far short of the pressures faced. The council are implementing a corporate sufficiency. Sorry, need a drink. It is only Coke, I hasten to add. Sufficiency strategy to mitigate risk, which includes 4 million to expand the number of council-run children's homes. This strategy could support so many children while saving the council money. However, and it's a big however, there are concerns about the current capital programme, with the delays in delivery, the increase in costs, a number of projects included that are not beneficial to most residents. The care homes are examples of the type of projects we should be focusing on. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Louise Fennick.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Louise Fennick, Peatley West Division. Is this the budget of missed opportunities? The stark reality of selling off the new HQ is that the staff are still operating from a not-fit-for-purpose, dilapidated, drafty, grotty old building that has cost a fortune to heat throughout the last 3 winters and no doubt into the next winter, when we could have been in a smaller, purpose-built, highly functioning, energy-efficient home that would have paid for itself in a few short years. And why is that? It's because of spite. The Joint Administration refused to carry through a Labour plan, a good plan, a plan to move the council onto its new chapter, a new location and a more functional 21st century building that would have saved us money in the long run, not to mention the plan to redevelop the Akeley Head site and invite blue chip companies to take up home here, bringing in much needed capital. All wasted opportunities steered by one emotion, spite. It's unforgivable. Can I ask where the 70 million sale price has gone? That alone would have been enough to save a big chunk of revenue on this year's budget. Where's it gone? Certainly my residents in Peatley have not seen a penny of it. In the words of Jerry Maguire, show me the money.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jake Miller.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Before I start, I just want to say a massive thank you to Jeff Garfoot. I'm not the most financially minded, but every presentation, and to Paul, not to leave you out, I always walk away feeling like I understand what it is that you're saying, even though it is depressing. So I do wish you well in your future endeavours. Chair, I just want to mention buses. They're a nightmare for everybody, but elderly lady in my community goes to a doctor's appointment, goes out for the bus doesn't turn up, it's £20 in a taxi. She gets to the appointment, she needs to come back a couple of days later for a blood test, goes out for the bus doesn't turn up, it's another £20 in a taxi. Gets to that appointment, she's been referred to Hartlepool, goes out for the bus, doesn't turn up, it's £30 there and it's £30 back. It's not a sole problem in my community, it's a problem everywhere that we've all commented on. The Coalition's response to this is that they'll take regional transport money, which is there to help improve bus services, and instead of using that money to provide subsidised services to our rural communities to better connect them to out the city, to the towns, they'll resurface a road or roads, because there's no detail. And there's no suggestion whatsoever of the new regional money, like the money that Councillor Marshall mentioned, that he and mayoral candidate Kim McGuinness successfully got for Durham, using that money to free up any capital to have more investment in Durham. County Durham, not the city. So the budget being proposed today is probably great for the city, but it's poor everyone else. And I say the city because we've all seen firsthand the quality of the road and the pathway services in certain areas compared to some of our rural communities. Another issue is everything's digital now. We need to report something, it's electronic. You need to request something, it's electronic. You need to apply for money, it's electronic. Coalition's response will make cuts in digital services of over £500,000. Great for some, not great for others. And that really summarises this whole budget, Chair. If you live in certain areas, it's good for you, but it's at the cost of everybody else. Increase council tax, use reserves, borrow money, but not fully deliver on promises. And it doesn't matter about anything else. It doesn't matter that we've got an empty school building in Trimden Grange, costing the council over £1 million, still empty, still causing trouble, still a blight on the community. It doesn't matter that there's a TDP live in Wheatley Hill, no funding to go alongside of it. All that doesn't matter. Coalition got 4 years in power. You brought the council into financial distress. You've kicked the big and serious cuts down the line to when we're on that side and you're back on this side. And we'll have to explain to residents why we're making cuts, why we're cutting services, and it's because of the mismanagement of this coalition. Great for political game, but it's poor everybody else.
Councillor Danny Wood.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just start by saying I was very surprised that proposals to scrap free parking on a Sunday in Durham City and to increase parking charges received no objections at all during the consultation period. Oh, sorry, that should have been no objections at all from local members, all Liberal Democrats, by the way. In fact, Councillor Freeman spoke in favour, and the recommendation to approve the changes was seconded by Councillor Mavin in what I can only describe as being a very convincing impression of a former Member of Parliament for the Sheffield-Hallam constituency. 321 people responded to a consultation on this, and of those, 94% were against the Joint Administration's proposals. Well, at least the Leader of the Councils thanked them this morning. Highways Committee were asked to recommend these changes in order to address issues of over-occupancy and to reduce carbon emissions. I'm sure that local businesses will be thrilled that their own elected members are committed to ensuring that less people visit Durham City each year. They certainly have not been listened to. The consultation on parking charges in Seaham and Crimden was even worse. This consultation received 114 times the amount of responses as the Council plan for 2024 to 2028 that we've approved in full Council this morning. The Joint Administration's big conversation on the Council's widely publicised inclusive economic strategy received 1,455 responses, less than half of the 2,971 people who responded to the consultation on introducing parking charges in Seaham and Crimden. Of the 2,971 responses, 97.5% of these were against the proposals. The committee were again told that these changes were to address issues with over-occupancy. It is a seasonal tourism destination, remember, but also that implementing the change would reduce carbon emissions. Well, it'll reduce tourists. Just last month, this council passed a motion unanimously. We had a recorded vote on it, just in case any of our cabinet members have conveniently forgotten. The motion was for Cabinet to reconsider the decision to end free after 2 p.m. parking, which has had a massive impact on towns across the county, including Chester Street.
1 minute, Councillor.
Yet these cuts are still included in the budget today. Feedback to the very general consultation on the MTFP savings showed that changes to parking charges were the biggest single reason for negative responses. This budget shows the total disregard the leadership of the Joint Administration have for vast swathes of County Durham, and it begs the question, why even bother to ask if you're not going to listen? After 3 years of this administration, I'm really starting to question what the joint we keep hearing about is actually a reference to. According to these consultations, there are at least 3,300 of our residents wondering exactly the same thing, and I cannot support this budget today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Joanne Howie.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Joanne Howie, Woodhouse Close Division. We all know that the country and the world are struggling with finances at the moment. However, we are looking after the most vulnerable through free council tax and transport to schools, especially those with special educational needs. Bishop Auckland and Woodhouse Close, with a Conservative MP, Conservative councillors and joint administration councils, are starting to see such a change, and people within the town are starting to become more positive about what's happening. Maybe it's time that other members start looking at best ways to work with the community and the leaders rather than just complaining. Just look at how the Labour Stanley Town Council have treated the town hall there. They've let it run down and they've given it back to DCC to then look after and to fund. This is what seems to have happened to a lot of the buildings in the county. They've just let them run down when they were in charge for us to then try and look after. What we need to remember is we are looking after the most vulnerable. We are looking after them with the 100% council tax reduction we still have. We're one of the only councils still to do that. Frontline services with wage rises for people that we need to fund. And we're looking after those in needs with all the different warm hubs that we've got and things like that. So I will be supporting the budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Julie Scurfield.
Chair, Councillor Julie Scurfield, Councillor for the Chesterley Street East Ward. I want to say the disappointment in Chesterley Street about the news that we will not get our promised leisure centre is palpable. Detailed plans consulted upon raised hope and expectations of long overdue investment into the health and well-being of our residents, now dashed by decisions taken by this administration to invest elsewhere in other things. On the Riverside complex, also subject to full detailed consultation. By that I mean this council actively sought the views and opinions of local residents. No news. We are now over 1 year on from that listening exercise, and the council have not had the courtesy of providing residents with a response and next step plans. Serious concerns about the council's plans for that site remain high outside of any response being provided. Add to this the removal of the free after 2 parking. The impact of this decision is being felt right here, right now, by our local businesses and our town. To hear that a unanimous decision by this council for Cabinet to review that decision has been deferred to later in the year is another kick in the teeth for our wonderful town, businesses and residents that myself and the Chesterley Street councillors have been working hard to try and rejuvenate. Place that alongside the decision to invest substantial sums into a high-end restaurant that the vast majority of our families will never set foot in because very many of them are struggling just to put food into their children's bellies. Added to which, we heard recently at the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee that there is a tsunami of children with SEND as a direct result of the impact of COVID. Where you put your money says everything about where your priorities lie. It is not hard to understand why there may be a view within our communities that your funding priorities
1 minute,
do not align with their local need and do not give a confidence that you appreciate the needs, wishes and priorities of our local communities or that you care about them.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David McKenna.
Thank you, Chair. Dave McKenna, Seam Division. Members, we're all aware of the nature of the Council's finances. The ward I represent has recently had its capital investment withdrawn for the plans for the leisure centre, so it's on the shelf again. Only last week, the Council imposed parking charges in my community to fill the black hole in the Council's finances. That's been covered a lot, but I'm telling you now, when you come into Seam, you're paying £3 and we can't even offer you a public toilet. What's that about? However, I am a veteran, and this issue is very important to me. I know campaigners never wanted the DLI Museum to close, and I respect their efforts over the years. But what baffles me is campaigners never lobbied for a high-end restaurant. This plan would be using public money on something that's not needed. As far as I'm concerned, Durham City has enough high-end restaurants.
Point of
As
order,
I recall,
Chair. Point of order. Can I
as I
just-
recall, previous...
Sorry.
As I recall...
I know there is some stretching of the truth in this debate. However, referring to the DLI as a high-end restaurant repeatedly is simply a lie, and it is political propaganda. There is nothing in any official document talking about the facility that says it's a restaurant.
Councillor, can you register to speak in?
Members, just to clarify what a point of order is. A point of order is raised if you consider there's been a breach of the procedure rules or of the legislation. A point of personal explanation is where you want to clarify the interpretation of what you've said in the meeting that's been repeated back incorrectly.
Councillor McKenna, yes, please.
As I recall, the previous DLI Museum had an art gallery to enhance footfall, but that didn't work, did it? The proposals agreed by the Cabinet are not only expensive at a time when resources are being taken away from our poorest communities, the proposals do not respect the wishes of those who campaigned against the closures. I am very concerned about the idea of diggers and industrial equipment cutting through the turf where the ashes of these Durham warriors have been laid to rest. Skimming off the topsoil, preserving it, then bringing it back, to me, is an outrageous proposal. This practice does not honour those who served the regiment. I do not want the lasting resting place of those that served to be disturbed. While the ground is not consecrated, it is sacred ground, in my opinion.
1 minute, Councillor.
I ask the Cabinet to have the area in question consecrated at the earliest opportunity, have plans drawn up for a memorial garden for relatives to come and pay their respects. This would ensure in the future there's a resting place for members of the Durham Light Infantry, the Light Infantry and the Rifles. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chris Lyons.
Thank you, Chair. Chris Lyons, Sedgefield Division. When this budget and the MTFP report were considered by scrutiny earlier this month, I found the discussion to be excellent. It was wide-ranging and covered many aspects, and members were articulate and passionate. As the Chair of Scrutiny stated in the meeting itself and today, we weren't there to agree with each other, and the range of opinions that were expressed reflected that. I think it's important to note that alongside concerns and challenges, board members also expressed strong support for the budget, describing proposals as a prudent approach to protecting frontline services and supporting the most vulnerable, while continuing a fully funded capital programme to invest in improving the county's infrastructure, to attract inward investment and build the economy for all. And it's that delicate balance that I want to focus on here. We have to sustain services and support residents who need assistance. This council has an outstanding record in that regard, and it's essential that we continue it. We also have to sustain capital investment in schools, transport, business and culture. All four areas are vital to our future prosperity. Those two aspects of what we do are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they are interdependent. To paraphrase a thought leader in public health, economic wealth drives economic health, and economic health drives economic wealth. While providing every bit of support that we can in the here and now to the most disadvantaged in our society, we must do everything that we can to catalyse change and create a better society for everyone. One with a better built environment for education so that young people have a fair chance of acquiring knowledge and skills for life. one with thriving modern employment sites and the physical links that allow people to access the better jobs that those locations support. One with improved easy access to footpaths, cycleways and leisure facilities so that people of all ages can live active, healthier lives for longer. One with a varied cultural offer
1 minute,
that celebrates County Durham's incredible history and heritage in a modern, welcoming way, boosting the inbound tourist economy and enriching leisure time for all of our residents. And a society that is building a burgeoning green economy, proactively and aggressively addressing the climate emergency for the sake of us all. In a financial context that is horrendously difficult for local authorities, this budget finds a balance that allows Durham County Council to play its role in doing all of that. And, crucially, it's genuinely balanced too. I applaud it, I support it, and I urge colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John Shuttleworth.
Thanks, Chair. Now for something positive. Just by way of background, our highways infrastructure is the largest asset we have, but it's the largest asset the Council owns. And if our highways infrastructure was not maintained, it would cost an estimated £8 billion to replace. In addition to the grant we received from the Department of Transport through the Local Transport Plan, we have prioritised investment from the Council resources to augment this funding, in part because it's simply insufficient to ensure we at least do not see a deterioration in the public highway. Last year, this administration prioritised investments as follows: initial £3.8 million in unclassified carriageway resurfacing, £2.5 million at Burneygill Bank to address a major landscape impacting on the structural stability of the B6300, Brownie Lane, Burneygill Bank, and thereby ensuring the future structural integrity of the road. And I hope Paul Taylor's in here somewhere, because he kept contacting me about that, but I've got no recognition for that. Never mind. In the current year, this administration prioritised investment in the following areas: initial £2.5 million in unclassified carriageway resurfacing. This and the investment last year has meant that our A, B and C road classifications have stayed at a steady state over the past few years, when many other areas have seen a deterioration. As a result of this investment, their condition is slightly better than the regional and national average. £15 million in major structural repairs to the A690 to address a historical major landslip impacting on the structural stability of the A690 eastbound in the vicinity of the Northern Power Grid Training Centre. The A690 is the main route in and out of Durham City, and if it was to fail, it would have a catastrophic impact on the travelling public and Durham's economy. £1.2 million of this will be expended in the current year, with the remainder being the next financial year. £1 million on road resurfacing and improvements at Framlegate Peth, which is the main route into Durham City, and which has enabled the reconstruction of the carriageway and ensured the future structural integrity of the road. A £410,000 investment to enable the cleaning and design of the final solution to maintain the weirs in Durham City, thereby protecting areas of the city against major potential flooding and subsequent disruption to the travelling public and economy of the city. As part of this budget round, we are also proposing further investments as follows: a further £2.5 million in unclassified carriageway resurfacing in each of the next 2 years, a further £1 million to undertake and implement the design solution to repair the Durham City weirs, £2 million to address a major landslip and reopen the Craighill to Lamsley Road, which has been closed for well over a year now, causing significant disruption to holidaymakers and local residents. £5 million over 2 years to address major repairs required to structures and bridges across the county, which the previous administration failed to put within the budget. We have not applied any reductions to our highways or winter maintenance revenue budgets, and that's one of the things that all members get complaints about throughout the year. And as part of the MTFP, we protected these key frontline services. Something that all members received many complaints about is the winter maintenance, and that's everybody gets that this time of the year, November, December, January. So that has not been touched. Bear in mind that we've suffered hyperinflation with costs of steel up 20% and bitumen up 40%. We're doing the best that we can within the budget envelope for our residents. We have a demonstrable track record of making strategic and important and necessary investments in our highways infrastructure, which we all use, public rights of way, footpaths and roads. And it's the best thing that we can do. And I'd like to say our roads are the best in the northeast. And can I just remind our colleagues on the right that in comparing our council tax, I'll remind you again, in 1999, you put it up 15.9%. Please don't forget that. Thank you.
Councillors, I still have a large number of people who wish to speak. May I suggest that we have a small comfort break, and that will stop the movement within the chamber, hopefully. Can we all agree on that? 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
meant to be in my ward, mine and John's ward in Deanside. And now I'm sat here 3 years later, no programme, it's been scrapped, there's no money for it. John and I even tried to commit some of our neighbourhood budget to revive the Mugger that's in Deanside on the split site that was notified for the leisure centre and the football pitch. And we weren't even allowed to do that. So we weren't even allowed to spend our own money in our own ward for our own communities for the things that mattered to us. Over time, I've seen Cabinet waste money on culture bids, that didn't happen. Levelling up bids, that didn't happen, amongst others. And now Cabinet has the brass neck to ask my residents of Deanside to start paying for parking, to start paying more council tax, when we've seen nothing in return. Nothing at all. So 3 years on, I'm not naive anymore. I'm angry and I'm upset, and so are my residents.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Liz Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Liz Brown, Neville's Cross. A few words about council tax. In 2022, this administration chose not to increase the core council tax rate. We were able to do that because of savings that were identified that covered the full amount required to pass a balanced budget. Doing this meant not having to use any of the council's MTFP reserve. We also received extra funding from the government. We can only dream about that now. Last year, the world and the UK were in a completely different place, so it was no surprise that most local authorities, including this one, were too. You will all have read the LGUIU Daily News this morning, which refers to the dire financial situation faced by local authorities. I would ask you to consider this news in relation to County Durham, which covers a large area and has a low council tax base. The unprecedented external cost pressures we are facing once again this year have not reduced. In fact, in many areas they have increased. These costs are unavoidable and must be accommodated if we are to set a legal budget. So, we have proven when there was an alternative to increasing the core council tax rate, we didn't. But this year, sadly, we have no alternative if we wish to continue to protect our services and our most vulnerable residents for longer. This year, it is proposed that the core council tax increases by 2.99%. This is in addition to finding savings in excess of 8 million next year and using our MTFP support reserves in excess of 3.7 million. By doing this, it means we are still able,
One
as
minute,
others
Councillor.
have said, to protect those who need our support most with this council's up to 100% council tax exemption scheme for the most financially vulnerable in our society. I note that there have been no viable or costed alternatives put forward by any other group, and I would hope that no one voting against this budget would be doing so out of ignorance of the first full implications. I therefore urge all members to support this budget, a budget that has been amended to take into account the recommendations of scrutiny and continues to invest in the future and protects our most vulnerable residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Maven.
Thanks, Chair. Leslie Maven, Belmont Division. In 2021, almost every member in this chamber found themselves in a position they'd never been in before. The 2022 budget setting meeting was the first one that I'd been to without any amendments being proposed by the opposition. I was surprised then that the opposition voted against it, despite having not proposed any alternative. But I thought they were new to opposition, so maybe they just needed time to settle in, or they didn't understand the pro-Q rules in this regard. 12 months later in 2023, another annual budget meeting, another round of people complaining and criticising from across the chamber, and still no alternative proposals submitted. Now here we are at the budget setting meeting in 2024, and not one single amendment submitted by any opposition member within the required timescales as per the Constitution.
the rules, remember, that they put in place in 2018. I accept that this is the ruling administration's role to develop and propose the budget proposals. However, I'm genuinely shocked and stunned that given every single member of the opposition is also a corporate parent, that you don't all want what is best for our looked after children. That you're not prepared to make sure the people who look after them get the wage increases they deserve, that they don't want to invest in new homes to make sure that children from County Durham don't end up miles away from here, and that we have the right people and resources to make a better future for them. By voting against this budget, you're voting against all the things I've mentioned, as all of these are contained within it, and reneging on your responsibilities as financial guardians to facilitate the setting of a legal budget. No one takes pleasure from having to increase taxes, but in the absence of more government funding, we must do so, as we have a responsibility to look after those who need it most, and I therefore urge everyone to support the budget so we can do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Charlie Kay.
Are we there yet? Yeah. Yeah, I promise. I've been told by my wife to use my inside voice today. So, and if I go out at any point, it's because she's kicked me. She said I get too loud. So, we have put measures in process. Right, on with the spiel. I'm going to vote against this budget for a number of reasons that have already been alluded to by my colleagues. So there's no point in going over what's already been said. But there are two things I would like to say. The first one is to Councillor Howie. I live in the next place on the Woodhouse Close, if you like, but it's all the same community. I use the leisure centre, I get my pizzas bought there for a treat now and then, and I socialise in that area as a dog walker. You've got massive problems in that area. Not all of your own making, I agree, because the Bishop Auckland MP has gained the acronym ABBA, anywhere but Bishop Auckland, and everybody says it, no matter what their political persuasions. Right, on to what the point is. Highways. Thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. I can't thank you enough for what you said there, because you've given me the perfect lead in. Last autumn, my friend and I went for a poodle on our motorcycles, British motorcycles I had, up Weardale, and we went all the way up to Alston. And I have to say, the road through Weardale is no better or no worse than anywhere else in County Durham. So I'm not saying why is all this being done, or because the councillors, yada, yada, yada. I haven't seen any evidence of that. But we decided to go back down the B6277, which goes down to Milton Teesdale. Maybe not to some of you, but frankly, I doubt it. And I'll tell you why. We blasted on down there, keeping within the speed limit, obviously. And no, we did. They're all bikes. We got to Milton Teesdale, and being men of a certain age, we would have a comfort stop. And my friend, who isn't political at all, but it's quite funny at times, he said, I'll tell you what, man, there's some boys in this Durham County Council, aren't they? I said, what do you mean? He said, 13 miles of road, like a billiard green, there was only me and you on it. I said, well, you know why, don't you? Why? I said, it just goes to the Deputy Leader's constituency. You're joking me. I said, I'm telling you that's why. And I'll tell you something else. This is true. I'm not making this up as I go along. I'm not making this, but it's serious, because...
1 minute, Councillor.
Yeah, I can't say that John Shuttleworth, Councillor Shuttleworth, has used his position for any influence, because in my opinion, I've seen it. But I hope that one day the Bishop Auckland area can see some of these billiard greens for two people, me and my friend. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Oh, before I go, 2 days later, I got a speeding ticket through the post because I've been doing 36 miles, 30 miles at 6 miles an hour into 30. Yeah, I'm still boiling about it, as you can tell.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Alwyn Gunn.
Well, thank you, Chair. Follow that, I think. But I just want to make a few points here, Chair, if I may. First of all, I would like to thank all of the officers for all of the work that they've put into this budget. I know that it's an enormous pressure in terms of what's happening. And a lot of things have already been said about what happened in terms of the austerity policy of the Tory government and the Lib Dem Tory government, actually, at the time, and the pressures that were placed on all local authorities because of that austerity policy. So we know that at that time, the councillors here, some of you weren't here, but mostly knew that at that time, the Labour who were in control of the council at the time had to make some difficult decisions. And 3 years ago, the coalition cabinet took control, knowing the situation, and still embarked upon a ruthless and rash spending spree of revenge and vanity projects, some of which have already been described, Chair. And selling off buildings, the new council building, and here we are, crumbling in more ways than one. And the largest authority in the northeast, homeless, just about. The posh cafe, not restaurant, posh cafe I'd call it, maybe. The former DLI museum costing millions, which could have been spent more wisely. And Councillor Hopgood, you mentioned, I want to come back on this, because you said that Councillor Marshall put the Abbey Leisure Centre in her ward, in your ward, first. So, you know, that was not your fault, but even if that was the case, you didn't change it. You've changed so many things. You've actually changed, abolished, or sold off so many of the projects that were Labour projects before you came into power. That one you didn't do.
1 minute, Councillor.
Maybe a little bit of a political gaffe there, I would say. And can I say as well that somebody's saying point of order, Chair.
Comments are supposed to be through the chair, I believe. I think we should be more respectful of the chair. Thank you.
Do it again, Richard.
Comments are supposed to be through the chair.
What?
Be a little more respectful to the chair than this.
Gunn, would you like to continue?
Thank you, Chair. I thought I was speaking through the Chair, and you know that I always give you respect. Can I also say that one of the other things that I want to pick up on here is Councillor Howie talks about the change in Bishop Auckland. And last week, she and her Tory councillor colleagues were photographed proudly announcing a much-needed extension to the food bank on Woodhouse Close. I know Woodhouse Close very well, actually. But if that wasn't so tragic, seeing them proudly standing there, it would be laughable, because the concept of cause and effect seems to have passed them by. So I would also like to just pick up on one more thing. And I'd like to just say, Chair, that this is a budget that has neglected the residents in our small towns and villages. It's been clearly outlined by previous Labour councillors here. And it's the coalition cabinet which is steeped in self-interest.
Point of order, Chair. Time's
and
elapsed.
puts politics before people.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
David Sutton-Lloyd. Sorry.
Chair, am I able to put a motion without notice forward, please? Well, I'd like to put motions forward without notice, but one precedes the other. So it's to basically, we've heard this for a couple of hours now, and I think probably we should be looking to go to a vote.
You are able to move a motion without notice that the matter is put to a vote. That requires a seconder.
I'll second
So, the motion, we've had a motion without notice that we go to a vote. If the chair thinks the matter has been sufficiently discussed, she will put that procedural motion to the vote. If that vote is carried, then the mover of the original motion, so Councillor Hopgood, would have her right of reply before putting the two items to the recorded vote.
Councillors, thank you for your attendance. I still have a number of people on the list to speak. I feel that all those people have registered for a reason. They want to be heard in this chamber, and rightly so. We should never try to stop someone speaking in this chamber.
Chair, thanks for that, but I'm not trying to stop people speaking at all. I'm very conscious of people who have families and dependents who may need to go, who by default will lose their vote. That's the reason behind it, but thank you.
Thank you. So I'm proposing that we continue with the speakers who are registered to vote. So the next speaker to vote would be David Sutton-Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. David Sutton-Lloyd, Aycliffe North and Midridge. I'd like to bring a positive into this debate. What does this budget do? Education. Again, as been pointed out, for the third year in a row, we've sat here and listened to opposition tell us all the reasons why we should not support this budget. And for a third year in a row, they have failed to come up with a single amendment or provide any form of alternative, despite having months to do so. As a local member in Newton Aycliffe, I want to say why I'm supporting the budget. Despite the financial climate that we've learned a lot about today, we continue to invest in our young people's future with this budget. It builds upon last year's investment into education. Last year, we invested money into a new build secondary school in Belmont. This year, we're investing millions in a new build and refurbishment of another secondary school in the form of Greenfields in Newton Aycliffe, which is a quarter of a mile from where I live. And as well as making a contribution to unlock a multi-million-pound investment in a new primary school in Middleton and Teesdale. I appreciate all of us would like to do more, but the reality is that we do not have an endless supply of funding. We'll never have the resources to do everything that everybody would like, so difficult choices always need to be made. I believe this budget provides a balanced approach to being financially responsible and to meet the demands while maintaining a commitment to invest in the priorities on behalf of our residents in better facilities where we can. And for that reason, I'd argue that everybody should support this budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fraser-Tinsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've waited to come into this debate because I wanted to listen to everybody's views, and I've read the budget, and I feel that some in the Cabinet who have overseen the budget live in a different world than many of us. And I think we all know as members here, and I include a lot of you over the aisle in this, that the services that residents rely on this county are at breaking point, and our budget has been an opportunity to safeguard those services. The fundamental reason we are here is to represent residents and deliver service to them. It's that simple. Yeah, the world's changed in the past 3 years, Ukraine, cost of living crisis, residents get that, but they still need the services. There remains a huge backlog in things like potholes, parking charge after 2. We've seen bus services are crumbling, things we've all heard today. And we live in a time when the government is telling councils, even in worse financial position than us, to sell their assets, use capital for revenue. That's the world we're in today, you know. Council taxes at eye-watering levels. So, you know, just tell me this, how can we justify to our residents the huge capital programme we have, borrowing to double from 440 million over the next 2 years, nearly £1 billion. Remember those interest rates we talked about? We need to be battening down the hatches at this time, protecting services when times are tight on the back of 14 years of austerity. I say no to a £20 million plus venue, art gallery. I don't think anybody really knows what it is over the way. I say yes to a meaningful, long-lasting memorial to the DLI on that site. How can we keep pumping money into culture in Durham City when our towns, including the one I represent in Wellington, and villages are withering, and services are in a real mess right across the country? Then there's to the white elephant, there's a replacement for this room and this building. Millions squirreled away for replacement headquarters. Do we actually need it? Again, as I say, the world's changed. How many work at home? Do we actually need the new venue, the new HQ that we're talking about? Millions that could be used to deliver services. Let's take the revenue from the sale of the Sands building and use it to deliver for residents. What I'm saying to you today, across this chamber, is to vote against this budget or to abstain. Go back to your residents and say to them that you're actually looking again at this. Sit down with us tomorrow and next week and call the Cabinet back with a new budget that we can vote on next Friday. Let's cut the capital fat out of this budget and deliver a budget for services across County Durham. We can then come back and say to the people of County Durham, we're protecting you when times are tough. I urge you not to support this budget. I urge you to vote against it. I urge you to abstain. There is a better way forward for County Durham, because it's not the budgets that are being presented to us today by this Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Alan Shield.
Thank you, Chair. The cost pressures, especially for statutory responsibilities in adult and children's services, being experienced by all local authorities across the whole of the UK, are attributable to many causes, but are very prevalent and impact on areas like ours. Almost 1 in 5 of council leaders and chief executives in England think that it's likely that their chief finance officer will need to issue a Section 114 notice this year or next due to the lack of central government funding to keep services running. That equates to some 31 councils out of the total of 153 upper-tier councils and local authorities in England. So therefore, we're not alone in having to make difficult decisions in order to set budgets in the most difficult circumstances. The vast majority of authorities plan to raise the council tax by the maximum permitted 4.99%, with several authorities who've already issued Section 114 notices being required to increase their council tax between 10 and 15%. We have regularly stressed that we are one of the few local authorities in the country who provide a very extensive support, up to 100% of relief to all eligible households as a result of our local council tax reduction scheme, which covers about 22% of our chargeable properties at a cost of some £63 million, with 53,000 claimants, 38% of which are pensioners and 62% are claimants, many of which come from low-income households but are in work and not unemployed. I just want to give you a few examples of the areas that we support. 37.3% of households in the Easington, Colliery and South and Eden Hill receive this support. 37.2% in Henhall and Woodhouse. 36.8% in Newton Aycliffe Central. 34.6% in Dontley-Dale and Deanside. And 33.2% in Craighead and South Stanley. That is just a few to mention. In addition to this support, the Poverty Action Steering Group have utilised significant proportions of the Welfare Assistance Reserve to supplement the support available through the Household Support Fund from central government, to progress many projects to further support our communities and residents. And I'll give you a couple of examples just to demonstrate how effective we have been. We are supporting an Advice Alliance. That's the Christian Partnership, the Citizens Advice and the East Durham Trust, as well as the Age UK providing financial advocacy. And a cost of living initiative returned nearly 8 times its investment value, with additional benefit entitlements realising some 2.8 million pounds of increased benefits and over £400,000 of debt saved. We're also looking to increase the number of bread and butter support hubs. Currently we have 15, and that will be across the whole of County Durham, a much needed and much well respected and used facility. Not to mention that we also provide the holiday provision with food, fun with food, and also what we do with regards to the welcome spaces, which supplemented the warm spaces that we enjoyed in 22-23, with other initiatives, particularly in our educational services. It is extremely easy to be critical of proposals or recommendations, and to be frank, we've got some world champions in this respect in this chamber, who sometimes make erroneous, misleading, or even politically misaligned rhetoric accusations. It is with huge disappointment that the Labour group, as the main opposition in this chamber, are again not providing an indication to the residents of County Durham how they would address the budget deficit other than to criticise the budget proposal summarised by the Joint Administration. Some Labour members have even related to the fact it's not our job to set a budget. That may be your considered opinion, but the advice from the monitoring officer is that failure to set a lawful budget in due time may be considered as misference in public office, negligence, or breach of statutory duty. Your intention today could be construed that this persistent negativity is nothing more than a deliberate delay in passing a lawful budget, which either promotes central government intervention with extremely serious consequences, probably impacting on our council tax benefit support scheme and the AAP or members' budgets. Or it enhances public perception that this is nothing more than political posturing, confirming that the opposition are more competent at doing this rather than actually running a council. No one in this council wants to put up council tax anywhere near the maximum of 4.99%. But for explanation's sake, a reduction of 1% on council tax equates to a saving of between 23 pence per week, which is £12 for the full year, for anybody living in a Band A property, or up to 35 pence per week, £18 per year, for anybody living in a Band D property. What we could look at is to deplete reserves further, which are already at a very measured level. That would reduce the balance of reserves further by a further £2.55 million. Or we can consider the implementation of direct frontline service provision reduction, all of which we do not want to do. That's why I support this budget, and I urge and recommend to all members that we have taken all aspects into account from the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. I'd also like to place on record, Chair, my sincere thanks to the Corporate Director of Resources, Paul Darby, and his team for the guidance and support to help deliver these budget proposals, and in doing so recognise the extraordinary and significant contribution Jeff Garford has made to this council over many years, as this will be, unfortunately, Jeff's last budget contribution. And he is wishing Jeff all the very best in his retirement from all members, past and present. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor
Sorry,
Richard.
Chair, I've waited until Councillor Shields finished speaking, but I would like to raise a point of personal explanation, and that's just to the fact that Councillor Shields has just alluded to somebody in this chamber has told lies and deliberately misled, I believe his words were. And I just wanted to sort of say that all of the information that all of the members of our group have used this morning have come from senior officers within this authority, and every single point, including the point that money is being blown away in Durham City Centre at the expense of the outlying areas, can all be substantiated in writing. So nobody's being misled. And I'd just like to ask Councillor Shield to retract that statement, because it's just not right that politicians should be standing up here lying right out of the Tory government rule book.
Chair, I'd just like to read the words again, right? The word lie was never used. The word was erroneous, misleading, or politically misaligned rhetoric accusations. That's quite clearly been stated, right? It's not lies. There are references that have been made in this chamber today which can follow that particular summary, and I stand by what I said.
Sorry, Chair, I don't want to prolong this, but thanks for Councillor Shield for confirming that our group's told the truth this morning.
Councillors, I know we've been here a long time. Councillor Richard Ormerod.
Chair, can I raise a point of clarity, please, regarding regarding Councillor Shields? I'm sorry, I actually indicated via this electronic device, but I would like to raise a point of clarity.
As long as it's on something that the councillor said.
Yes, it is.
In response to something you've said.
No, it's actually what...
Councillors, please. Let's have some clarity on what we're doing. So it is only on what Alma has said that she can have clarity on.
A point of personal explanation may only relate to some material part of an earlier speech by the member which may appear to have been misunderstood in the present debate. The ruling of the Chair on the admissibility of a personal explanation will be final.
So just for clarity, because the point of clarity is what you said, it can't be raised now. So we move on to Richard Ormerod.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't intending to speak today. Richard Ormerod, Elburn Giles Division. I wasn't intending to speak today, but I have to take issue with comments from Councillor Fenwick on the decision not to move the council into the Sands headquarters. The decision was absolutely not based on spite. I know everyone on this side of the chamber, and spite is not something I ever come across. We're just not that sort of people. The Sands HQ would have caused absolute havoc for residents in the Sands estate, in my division, an estate which has only one road in and out. The Sands HQ was also opposed by Labour parish councillors in the city of Durham. Were they being spiteful as well? And it wasn't just Durham City. There was a by-election a few years ago when my colleague Bev Colt was first elected. And during the campaign, people in Cornsey Colliery were expressing their opposition on the doorsteps. The decision was not based on spite. It was based on listening to the people.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I just remind everyone that the debate is about the budget? We move on to Ken Robson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ken Robson, Aycliffe Western Division. Can I start by thanking my colleagues across the chamber here for reminding me why I was elected, talking about the DLI Museum and the headquarters on the river. It was a great help to my campaign. As we move on to my little talk now, as a town and county councillor elected to the council as a representative by the electorate of Great Aycliffe, I take very seriously my duty to represent the views of my residents as a town and county councillor. I've been troubled for some time in regard to the proposal for reduced funding to Great Aycliffe and other councils under the Local Council Tax Reduction Scheme. As many of you will know, I have stridently lobbied for this funding to be retained in its entirety, or if not possible, to extend the reduction period of the financial support from 2 to 4 years. I acknowledge that Cabinet agreed to the extension from 2 to 3 years, but it's still a very difficult pill to swallow. As we're all aware, Durham County Council is having to absorb significant cost increases in adult social care, home-to-school transport, looked after children's services, all of which are statutory compliance services, not forgetting the inflationary energy cost increases and pay inflation pressures. As a county councillor whose residents access all of these vital services, I understand and appreciate these pressures. The government since 2010 has drastically reduced funding to councils. The scope for further savings in managerial and back office efficiencies is becoming exhausted, following the delivery of over £260 million of savings from 2010 to March 2024. The government, in its 5th of December 2023 policy statement,
1 minute, councillor,
openly encouraged local authorities to utilise reserves to balance their budgets rather than address the underlying position. Given the financial pressures facing councils, using reserves to continually balance annual budgets is not a sustainable approach. For Durham County Council, the total savings requirement over the next 4 years is £58.4 million, with £14.4 million of this falling into 24-25. Despite being deeply troubled by the reduction in the LCTRS grant in the MTFP 14 as a single issue, overall, I have no issue with this budget. We simply have no choice. Therefore, whilst I disagree with the element of the LCTRS reduction, I fully support this County Council budget proposal incurring a 2.99% increase in core council tax and 2% in social care, and I strongly urge that all members do
Time,
likewise.
please, councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm disappointed, as all members will be, that we are pausing the leisure centre new builds at Chesley Street and Seaham. While this at the moment is easy to see, as the pressures in our budgets are restricting the amount of borrowing we can afford. We continue to spend and invest in leisure throughout the county, and we have spent £13 million this year and expect to spend a further £25 million in the next financial year. The plan for the improvements to our leisure centres was set out in the Cabinet paper of March 21 and is not down to favouritism, as has been suggested earlier. Chair, we had only £40 million in the budget for our leisure centres, and we would need another further £50 million to complete the Chesley Street and Seaham leisure centres. As members will know, other councils are withdrawing from leisure. Gateshead have closed theirs. Even Newcastle had a £20 million levelling up money, but shelved the idea because of revenue costs. And this is repeated around the country. We have, however, with the help of Cabinet colleagues, secured £10 million for the improvements in Chesley Street and Seaham to safeguard their future. Councillor Marshall said in his speech that buildings are falling around our heads. Can I remind members of the last full council where Mr Nixon, a resident of Stanley, asked questions of how Stanley Town Council had let the people of Stanley down? We have since done a further dilapidation survey of the Civic Hall, and because of it has been left for a further year with no heating, no repairs to the roof and windows.
1 minute, councillor.
In the worst winter that has been for a number of years, the repairs bill could reach £1 million to bring it back into proper use. Members, we are talking about our council tax rise to all our residents. Some of that tax now is going to be used for the repairs to Stanley Civic Hall.
Councillor Rowlandson, can I just remind you, it's on the budget.
Yeah. The behaviour of Stanley Town Council and Councillor Marshall, who is leader of the Labour group, and the members of the Town Council, along with Councillor Binney, Hampson, Councillors Mahone and Hanson, are all responsible for the failure of this building. Chair, how can Labour be trusted with the finances of this council with that kind of a...
Time, councillor.
Thank you. I will be voting for the budget. Thank you.
Point of personal expression, please, Chair. Thanks, Chair. And in relation to what you said was the rules, and if you can clarify, I raised Chesney Street in my little spiel at the start. I was in Cabinet when it was approved. It was obviously announced by Durham County Council. I've still got all the screenshots, etc. Can Councillor Rowlandson confirm, because he seemed to allude there that because there wasn't enough money, they had to cancel some others and obviously refurb. Can he confirm that Chesney Street was indeed in the summer of 2021 approved and replaced subsequently a year or so later with Woodhouse Close? There was the money there for Chesney Street. They changed their mind.
Councillor, a point of personal explanation isn't a question.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of what I have to say has been said. The children we keep in care, and also the home to school
Sorry, Ted, can I just stop you there for a moment? Please be respectful, and that just isn't necessary. Thank you.
The home to school transport. Unfortunately, the costs of these are going up the whole time. We have to supply these things. We have no choice. What the Cabinet have done is to look into all costs, and we've had to cut back where we could save anything at all, just to supply home to school transport and the care for the children. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elizabeth Scott.
Thank you, Chair. As others have said, it's very disappointing that the opposition has not brought anything of substance to this meeting today. What we have brought as the Joint Administration to Durham is an inclusive economic strategy, something that was materially lacking in the past. And a key driver within that strategy is our county's culture, and that culture needs investment, and I will make no apology for that. The new museum and art gallery is at the heart of this, as is the DLI collection, and I make no apology for that. We have a proud military history that Labour tossed aside, and they have made no apology for that. Under our administration, tourism has topped the £1 billion level for the first time, demonstrating that our strategy is working. We're establishing a culture trust to support our cultural assets, in particular the DLI and the Story. And this is all about jobs, prosperity, pride, skills and partnership. I'd also like to mention and thank Councillor Miller for his comments around the car parking agenda and share a bit of detail that I'm sure all members will be pleased to hear. That data in Durham City shows that since we got rid of free after 2 last spring, footfall in the city has increased exponentially and has now surpassed pre-pandemic levels. And just on the last point about toilets, I think it was Councillor McKenna raised, in Seaham, the County Council gave its public toilets to the Town Council in Seaham some 20 odd years ago. The Town Council then gave them away, so we don't have them anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chris Hood.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by giving members a number. 5,080. 5,080. That's the number of care home beds across County Durham. 5,080 beds in 142 care homes, supporting older people people with physical disabilities, learning disabilities and mental health needs. Our adult care services are dedicated to empowering individuals to achieve maximum independence, enabling them to stay in their own homes and communities for as long as they can. We've done this by investing in key services such as reablement and intermediate care. In contrast to many authorities across the country, we have successfully navigated the challenges of demand management. Our efforts have empowered individuals to maintain their independence, support carers, and also assist greatly in supporting people being discharged from hospital, an area where we have constantly performed well. The rising cost of care, coupled with recent increases in the national living wage, have created significant financial pressures on our adult social care budget. Cost increases have been driven by the demands of providing quality care, whilst also ensuring fair wages for social staff. As a result, we are constantly striving to find innovative solutions to manage these financial challenges and maintain the high standards of care that our communities expect to deserve. Our budget proposals ensure that we continue to provide a diverse and high-quality care market to meet the increasingly complex care and support needs of individuals. Data compiled by the County Council Network show that out of 136 county and unitary local authorities in England who have so far published their budget proposals, regardless of political makeup, 128, that's 95%, plan on raising their council tax by the minimum permitted 4.99%. This is out of necessity, not by political choice. This joint administration strives to make the right decisions, even when they are tough, so we continue to do the right thing for County Durham. We've made these proposals to continue our unwavering commitment to providing first-class care to our communities, to continue to eliminate waiting lists for care packages. As our live data shows, there is nobody in County Durham awaiting a home care package. To continue to spend up to £19 million per annum providing mental health support to council residents, and to continue to support residents in those 5,080 care home beds in the 142 care homes across County Durham. And please note, 9 out of 10 of the beds in those 142 homes are rated as good by the Care Quality Commission. Out of the 56 Labour members of Durham County Council, 52 of you have care homes and care beds in your ward. 52 of you on that side of the chamber have a responsibility for 97 care homes. 52 of you have a responsibility for a total of 3,182 beds. And you don't have any plans for them. You don't have
Sorry,
any proposals.
Chair, point of order. Could you just
You
ask
don't have any suggestions.
Councillor Hunt to speak through the chair? He seems to be staring at our members and shouting at them.
And you don't have any plans for them. You don't have any proposals. You don't have any suggestions apart from voting against the only proposal on the table. But you're happy to neglect your duties and therefore neglect your communities. Your whole purpose here today is to be obstructive and to try and cause disruption to this council. Your leader then lectures us on morals. Your only purpose here today is to do absolutely nothing to help the people of County Durham. And to use a phrase, is that how County Durham Labour plan to put us on notice?
Time, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Alex Watson, Consett North. I'm fairly confident that no one in this chamber became a councillor because they wanted to make savings or cuts or increase council tax. I know I certainly didn't. I'm also certain that just over 2 years ago, no one knew, having begun the process of COVID recovery, we would also face a war in Ukraine and spiralling inflation costs that would result in the unprecedented cost pressures that were to come. But having heard lots of hot air from the opposition this morning, the professional advice and opinions of our Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer, advice in terms of our responsibilities for facilitating the setting of a balanced legal budget, appears to have fallen on deaf ears. Despite a full year of regular updates in both Cabinet, scrutiny and through opposition briefings, they sit here today and their last-minute .com comments. Where have you been over the last 12 months? The evidence is there for all to see. We have heard about all the external pressures. We all acutely understand our inherent low tax raising capacity and the cost pressures that are driven by our geography and demographics and deprivation levels. We all know we are reliant on making savings and on increasing funding to cover our unavoidable spending pressures just to stand still. Yet still, despite these challenges, we have a balanced budget before us to approve, with a modest £3.7 million use of reserves next year. Significantly less than most of the councils
1 minute, Councillor.
are faced with using, and in no small part down to the saving proposals that have been developed and consulted on. Yes, I am sure we can all find something we would rather not to do, or indeed things we'd like to add to do. But this is the real world. Whether we like it or not, regardless of party politics, we should all remember that we have a legal and moral responsibility to set a legal and balanced budget. In light of what we have heard today and throughout the year, we must support this budget today. We need to ensure that we continue to protect those who need it most, whilst continuing to invest in our county and its assets and people. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor. Councillor Angela Surtees.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Angela Surtees representing Easington Division. That's part of the MSOA that Councillor Shield was talking about. That receives the highest number of local council tax support scheme reserves. Deprived communities, left behind communities, destitute communities, all reported in government reports, Joseph Rowntree, North East Child Poverty, Coalfields. Yeah. But to me, everything about this budget is central. It's central to Cabinet and their wards, central to the City of Durham and this Coalition's Cabinet are driving forward centralised decision-making policies, removing the voice from locally led levels that are based on need. They're not listening to our residents in the many consultations held, and they're not listening to our members. Policy and strategy is being formed with misdirection, poor response, ignored comments, with poor insight and leadership. Their cultural focus is misdirected and misplaced. Anger is being expressed about the words high-end eatery. Well, would a restaurant with a conference centre and cafe to support the Durham Innovation Centre sound better? Because that doesn't really support the wider county either. And it certainly doesn't offer any sympathetic consideration to the previous use of the building that my colleague Councillor McKenna spoke about earlier. We've also heard that the cultural offer is about to be destined for reduction and restructure further down the line. So it appears that the investment into the cultural offer now will be diminished further down the line, all at the expense of our residents and staff, apparently. Difficult decisions are being pushed further down the MTFP timelines, along with any promises made in place of voting favours. Decision makers failing to lead because they know they haven't delivered and have no intention of doing so. The reality of this budget is no reality. It misdirects and, like the last 3 years, certainly doesn't deliver. I can't support a budget that imposes 4.99% council tax rise onto our residents at a time when the cost of living is still upon everyone.
1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Especially when the distribution of regeneration is centralised and the forward thinking of this coalition is to cut front-facing services that mean the most to our residents. For the last 3 years, the Household Support Fund has propped up the welfare assistance, and the fact that the Labour policy of the local council tax reduction scheme is being used to justify the coalition's increase in 4.99% council tax, I just really find this. These families out there are on the cusp of sink or swim. The jam families. I don't like the term, but just about managing. The reality here is we're a county in poverty, deprived as people, communities, and deprived by the government. Not provide adequate funding to support our statutory services, never mind any of the services. And this coalition are enabling this government by duplicating its methodology, sell to save, although in Durham's case, it's sell to fund pet projects with increases to revenue pressures in the MTFP unnecessarily. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sam McMahon.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Sam McMahon, Craighead and Southmoor Division. I wasn't originally going to speak today, but after some of the comments that have been made around this chamber, I felt I had to. The situation with Stanley Civic Hall shows the joint administration are pushing the liabilities and costs onto the poorest and most vulnerable parts of the county. The council wants to discuss poorly maintained public buildings. Just think about where you're standing. Stanley Town Council, in the wake of COVID, when all of our communities were suffering, asked DCC to work with them to maintain the Civic. I know what you're going to say, Chair. I'm getting to the budget. Don't worry. And the council dithered, delayed, and then told them there was no help coming. And then within 2 weeks of that building being handed back, it's up for sale. Why is it that this administration can find money in its budget to fund vanity projects in Durham City like the development on the former DLI site, while public buildings in our communities are being sold off, neglected and run down? What is it about our communities that you don't like? Anyway, our communities are being left behind, and I also have another point on council tax. Councillor Shuttleworth likes to talk about what former administrations did in the distant past. In 1999, I wasn't even born. Perhaps he should focus on what this budget is doing for our communities and not what other administrations have done in the past. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jan Blakey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've listened with interest to the comments from the opposition and everything what is wrong with this budget. Surely, with so much to criticise, you could have at least identified at least one amendment, but no, for the third year in a row, nothing has been submitted by the deadline ahead of this meeting. I've been a member of this council for many years and listened to many interesting debates on the budget. In every one of them, from all sides of the chamber, but never have I witnessed the principal opposition party fail to provide an alternative, whilst at the same time objecting to everything. Have all members read the advice from our monitoring officer with regards to our legal responsibilities? It is to facilitate the setting of a legal budget, not to frustrate the setting of the budget, which is effectively what objecting to the budget without any alternative proposals is doing. By objecting to this budget, you are also objecting to the £1 million of funding being provided to help some project our employability services as we move into the funding regime, and to the funding which I am proud this council provides for its most vulnerable residents. Through the council tax reduction scheme, this council protects 54,000 financially vulnerable households throughout our local council tax reduction scheme. This is 22% of all chargeable properties in the county, whether that be the 16% who have no bill at all to pay, or the other 6% who receive some element of support in reducing their bills. Another 7,700 pensioners and 6,700 people in low incomes. Our council tax reduction scheme...
1 minute, Councillor.
Our council tax reduction scheme is by far the most generous in the North East, if not the UK. And for that reason, as well as all the other detailed in the budget, from infrastructure investment to efficiency savings, I fully support this budget and would urge all members to do the same. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shirley Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. And like many others, I wasn't going to speak, but I just would like to point out the phrase that's on there, debate, not hate. You know, we've had quite a lot of debate here, but there's been quite a lot of finger-pointing, really verbally finger-pointing done in this chamber, and it's not nice at all. I'm proud to say I'm a councillor for my town of Shildon and Dean Valley. I'm proud to say that I'm a county councillor, and you know what? I attend the National Association of Councils, and I represent Durham County Council. And when I attend those meetings and those seminars and the workshops. I'm proud when people are saying about the good work that gets done in Durham County Council. You know, and we are thought of as a really, really good council. But you know what? I think everybody's missing the point here. Every single one of us, every single 126 councillors in this room will get fingers pointed and will be blamed for this council tax budget that's been set. Whether we set it at 1% or we set it at the 49.9%, we will still be blamed for this. And we do have difficult decisions to make as councillors. And, you know, we don't always agree with each other. But, you know, a little bit of respect goes a long, long way, because we all want the best for our areas. I live in one of the worst deprived areas, and it is a left-behind community. Talk to anybody in Eldon Lane when we've got crime rates that are going through the roofs. You know, we need to start and tackle it. You know, not keep papering over the cracks, not keep putting stick and plasters over things. We need to get to the root cause of all of our issues in this county, in this country, to be able to move forward. And we are in a dire straits, every single one of us, every single council in this country, because of all of the austerity and because of all of the cuts. I just would like people to bear that in mind. Every single one of the 126 councillors in this room will be blamed for whatever decisions are made today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mark Wilkes.
Thanks for that, Shirley. I agree with you. I've spent quite a lot of this year, Chair, helping to care for somebody quite vulnerable, somebody very vulnerable. I'll be burying my mother on Friday. Got up at 4:41 this morning to come here for this budget meeting. And I did that not just because I was elected to do that, but because I need to know that all of the other vulnerable people throughout this county have the funding there so that the services that they need will actually be able to be provided over the next 12 months. That's why I'm voting for this budget, because I'm not willing to risk somebody from down in London coming up here and cutting the things that our people need. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Simon Wilson.
Yeah, Councillor Simon Wilson, Sacriston Division. To be perfectly honest, I've seen the litany of arguments on either side here. I've seen the list of failures by this administration since they took over, and I know that so much of everything and the hole that we find ourselves in is due to the failures of the national government that came in 2010. And as I've said before, there's a lovely symmetry that we have now, that you have the Tories and the Lib Dems cuddling up together again, and the start of the decline in 2010 of local government, and these lot have continued it here.
Point of order, Chair. Please, through the Chair. Please, it was a lot of pointing and intimidation coming this week. Can we please ensure that we just...
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillors, there is no necessity in this chamber to behave badly or to raise our voices. It's unnecessary. Yes, Councillor.
Chair, could I make a suggestion that we go to the vote, especially in light of what Councillor Wilkes has just said? I just think, to be respectful for him sitting here listening to this, I think we should just go straight to the vote.
Councillor, Councillors. Councillors. I only have 2 people to speak. And then we will go to the vote.
Councillor Bell.
And then, sorry, Councillor Bell and Councillor Hopgood will come back.
And then we'll go to the vote.
And then we'll go to the vote. Councillor Maureen McKeon.
Thanks, Chair. We're not the only council in the country having this discussion. Lots and lots are. I've just read a headline that says 10% of councils might actually topple over in the coming year. It's a crunch year for local government. And that's what I think about when I see the council tax rise in front of me, but I'm also thinking about something that the North West Durham MP said to GB News last month about there being 2 potential rounds of tax cuts coming from central government as part of an electioneering plan. And given that we are going through our reserves fairly quickly, I believe more quickly than we did pre-2021, and more quickly even than people who, other councils in our cohort, that just gives me a bit of pause for concern, because I'm just worried that the future residents of County Durham are paying the price for a bunch of discussions and decisions beyond their control. And I also just wanted to say on the point about Labour putting an alternative budget forward, Councillor Marshall, I'm sure, would be more than happy to set one from the Leader's office. Thank you.
Councillors, there is no one else registered to speak, so I propose we move to close the debate. I will now invite Richard Bell to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the officers for a very comprehensive and thorough report, and particularly Mr Darby and Mr Garfoot for their work throughout the year in educating members across the Chamber in financial matters. That work will never end, I think. I've listened to the contributions from across the floor. I've heard a lot of contradictory things, to be frank. I've simultaneously been accused of slashing services, yet going on a spending spree, which anybody knows me on the latter point is certainly a very unlikely thing to happen. We've heard members opposite claiming credit for £74 million of new government transport money, yet paint a picture of life in County Durham so bleak that is unrecognisable. We've heard the capital budget being criticised as too fat, and simultaneously we've heard calls to expand it. Not a lot of what I would call coherent comment coming out of that. But let's focus on the core numbers of the budget. The pressures, £13 million additional cost from the 9.75% increase in the national living wage. That's mainly adult social care issue. Pay inflation for our directly employed staff of £14.9 million. And roughly speaking, every 1% on the council tax, every 1% on the pay equates to 1% on the council tax, around 2.65 million. Looked after children pressures up by 12 million, primarily demand-led, and that's not inflation, that's demand, that's numbers-led. Home to school transport up 2.5 million. The list goes on, total pressures around 62 million. The additional funding being provided by government next year totals 30 million, and that is very welcome, but as has been said, is not enough to meet the cost pressures. However, we've still been able to set a balanced budget with the assistance of almost 4 million from our MTFP reserve, and in doing so accommodate an additional £90 million of new capital investment in assets and infrastructure. Not vanity projects, as has been suggested. Most of this capital expenditure is unnecessary and sometimes overdue replacements. We find ourselves with an ageing stock of council and school buildings and a network of roads and bridges that are coming to the end of their shelf life. Multiple footbridges in Durham City, several road bridges across the county. We've made provision for £5 million of investment in our failing bridges county-wide as part of this MTFP round, but that's clearly not enough to fix them. We're proposing £35 million next year to continue the new school builds at Belmont, Greenfield at Newton Aycliffe and Spennymoor Oxclose Primary. Every 20 million of capital borrowing roughly costs £1 million a year to service the debt, and it follows that we can't afford to do everything that we would like. Leisure centres have been mentioned quite a lot, but can I just say that that leisure paper in March 21 with the list of leisure centres to be rebuilt as new was an aspirational paper, but the money was not there in the budget then to build all of those leisure centres. The money is not there now. In other words, we were left with a wish list without the funding to fulfil it. So we are not cutting funding for that. That money was never there. We are finding money for that. Utilising reserves to balance the budget represents good financial sense, provided it is for the short term. We've been criticised for use of reserves, but over the 12 years from 2010-11 to 21-22, the previous administration used reserves at an average of £9.5 million a year over that period, which is way above, I think you'll find, what we have been spending from reserves in our previous two budgets and in this budget. So please don't ever accuse us of financial irresponsibility or losing control, as one member put it. Don't please ever accuse me of losing control over the money of this council. It would not be responsible to spend our diminishing reserves on one of capital schemes at this stage. Reserves should only be used to develop plans to make savings to live within our means. In his Section 25 report, our Chief Finance Officer noted our total reserves will have reduced by over 30 million to 161 million at the year end. On top of this, we have a general reserve of 29.3, which is just within the threshold we have set in this paper. Increasing the council tax is never easy or popular, but we have to protect our statutory public services, and it is the correct thing to do. As has been said, those on low incomes and County Durham are afforded significant protection through the council tax reduction scheme, which, unlike virtually every other council in the country, does not cap the limits that people can receive. This joint administration is in the business of sound management of the council. This budget is a fair, balanced and county-wide budget for the whole county.
1 minute, Councillor.
That we can be satisfied with as a very good endeavour in very difficult circumstances. And with that, Chair, I commend the proposal set out in this report and second the recommendations, noting the significant uncertainties and challenges that exist beyond next year. And I ask all members to support this sensible, fair and balanced budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, point of personal expression again, please.
Yes, Councillor.
Chair, I'm not going to sit here and listen to an aspirational. It was issued on the Durham County Council website. Myself, Councillor Bell and everybody applauded it. It was agreed, it was approved, it was option 9. Right? They may have changed their mind. And Councillor Bell actually told us at a meeting in passing that it may never happen now because of budget cuts. That's what he said. So it was approved, they've changed their mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor, for that point. Can I now ask the Leader of the Council to give her right of reply?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take the opportunity to address some of the comments that have been raised today, if that's all right, before moving to the vote. It's been said that we haven't had enough time to read the papers. We haven't had enough time to consult. We've had a year. You get a quarterly report to overview and scrutiny. The budget comes to Cabinet every quarter, and without exception, the vast majority of the opposition never attend. I just want to correct something that Councillor Sexton said earlier in the meeting when I was on Politics North. I said leisure retail, not leisure centre. There is a big difference between that. I also said that it was our duty as members of the public, as councillors, to promote our areas instead of constantly talking them down. And for clarification on figures, the figure for Chesley Street new build is 25 million and not 17 million. And Bishop Auckland was always the first leisure centre to be rebuilt because of the condition. All that changed was it moved from Tyndale to Woodhouse Close at the request of the residents. Councillor Marshall, so where are your political choices? Not a single amendment. My definition of mismanagement is clearly different to yours. £99 million of devolution funding secured for our county before the even election of the mayor. Investment delivered and not just spoken about. 62 million invested in leisure, 60 in Net Park, joint venture partnership procurement for Agley Heads. And if you'd like, I just want to point a couple of facts out. If you read your own Cabinet report from early in 2021, you were present at Abbey Leisure Centre prior to 2019 doing the consultation. It was always there at the start of that programme. And on page 36 of the programme delivery, in February 2021, of the Towns and Villages Investment Plan moved by Councillor Marshall, Framilgate Moor regeneration was there to start that financial year. If you'd spent as much time working on amendments as you have political speeches today, maybe there'd be some credibility and we'd have had something to debate. Councillor Shaw, I don't know about you, but I'll be here at the 2025 budget. This isn't the last one, even though you may want it to be. And we haven't taken any money out of the Leisure Transformation Programme. You'd never put enough in it. And house building, another mess we've had to sort out yet again. Your identified sites, one being covered in Japanese knotweed that can't be built on for over 5 years, and a couple of bungalow sites built on hillsides that can't accommodate bungalows. And Councillor Varty, I hope you are voting for the budget, because choosing not to is voting against investing in our looked after children's homes. And Councillor Tinsley, perhaps Mr Darby will meet with you after the budget meeting to go through the difference between capital and revenue. So let's be clear here today. By voting against this budget, you vote against everything in it, not just the one or two things you don't like. You're voting against supporting our most vulnerable residents, investments in children's home, leisure, highways. I could go on, but I won't. We've heard enough. And I wish to thank all members who've attended today and urge you to support the budget.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tinsley.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. I'm very clear on the difference between capital and revenue spending. What I'm saying is actually in accordance with what the Secretary of State, Michael Gove, is saying, is that we should be in a position now where we're looking at using capital for revenue spending, because that's the position we're in because of the way this council is being managed over the last 3 years. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, may I ask as a point of order for the Section 151 officer to come in and clarify?
It's okay, Chair. Yeah, so I think that if I remember right from the debate, it was in the context of the receipt from the Sands sale. So obviously, capital receipts cannot be used to fund revenue expenditure. In fact, in the report, if you look in the capital strategy, and there's a section in the report about seeking dispensation from the Secretary of State to use capital receipts as revenue money. And you'll see in the report that, my recommendation is that we're not in a position where we need to do that at this stage, and therefore we're not seeking to take up those powers that are set out in the legislation. So we do have the legal ability to do it, but only if in extreme circumstances and when you're in sort of effectively in sort of real financial difficulty, and we're not in that position at this time, and therefore it's not recommended.
Sorry, Chair, a point of order. The officer has just said we're not in that position. So legally, if you are in that position, you can, but we're not in that position.
Councillors. Councillors. I will now hand over to the Head of Legal and Democratic Services to proceed with a recorded vote on the motion relating... Excuse me, councillors. I will now hand over to the Head of Legal and Democratic Services to proceed with a recorded vote on the motion relating to the Medium-Term Financial Plan 2024-2025 to 2027-2028 and Revenue and Capital Budget 2024-2025.
Thank you, Chair. So we are voting on item 10. I won't read out the title again. The Chair's just done it. If you are voting in favour of the recommendations, it's button 1, 2 for against, and 3 to abstain. Please wait for the buzzer before to indicate that the vote is open before casting your vote. If you press the wrong button, pressing the right button will correct it. And as has been stated, the way in which you vote will be recorded in the minutes. Thank you.
We're closing, councillors. We're closing the vote. Councillors, the result is 63 for, 56 against, no abstentions. The recommendations are therefore carried. Members, the recorded vote will now take place to set the council tax in order to meet the County Council's budget requirement for 2024-25. Can I once again hand over to Head of Legal and Democratic Services to proceed with the vote?
Thank you, Chair. It's the same process as before. Wait for the buzzer to indicate that the vote is open. It's 1 in favour, 2 against, 3 to abstain. If you press the wrong button, pressing the right one will correct it.
Councillors, we're closing the vote. Councillors, 63 for, 56 against, no abstentions. The recommendations are carried. We move on to item 12. There are no questions that have been received for today's meeting. So can I just say, councillors, that concludes today's business for the council meeting. I would like to thank everyone who has taken part and to those members of the public and media who have been watching this meeting. Can I also thank you for your patience and for a mainly polite meeting. Safe journey.